Hi everyone. Today we'll be doing one thing and one thing only, which is reading part of my interview with the vampire announcement, which is talking about my book series and an upcoming volume that I have planned. However, it's so big that I'm going to be reading it in 3 parts. To that, we'll be starting here at the top and going down to here, stopping at love letters, essay, and rememory, which divides into 2 parts, essays and rememory, the essay on tyrants and their charm, followed by another piece on rememory, which we will be reading in 2 separate videos after this one. To that, and looking at the table of contents for Interview with the Vampire, we will be reading from Concerning State Vampirism to On Holistic Struggle, Healing the World from Different Positions Within It, and Saving Essay and Rememory, On Tyrants and Their Charm, and Making Trouble, Cryptonomy-Style, and Rice Bloodlines and Charting New Destinies in the Blood, for 2 follow-up videos, 1 apiece, making this a 3-parter. Keeping all of that in mind, this is still going to be a pretty long video overall, and it's essentially me reading from a script from top to bottom, but I will still probably make small mistakes, and more to the point, I will make in the future small corrections to the document that I'm reading here. They should be relatively small at this point. All of that being said, what you see in this video will inevitably contain small mistakes and become mildly outdated as I keep working on this document. I will insert it eventually into a book volume similar to the ones already on my website in my book series, which, when I do that, I will want it to be as perfect as possible, whereas the video here on YouTube is more like a promotion when the manuscript is a work in progress. The part that I'm showing you being more proofread than some of the other stuff, but all the same, it's not quite ready for me to put it into a document and load it online to my website. It's just a promotion, or rather a promotion of an upcoming promotion, a spearhead, if you will, the tip of the iceberg. Lastly, as I read this document, Interview with the Vampire, is tailored to be what I consider safe for the internet, insofar as I don't feel like I have to age gate it because it contains various things within it that, while you might not want to have your boss look over your shoulder while you're at work and see you looking at them, are the kinds of things you'd find when looking up classical art in a Google search. Content warning, classical artistic nudes, oil painting female nipples from the 1800s, bikini-style pinups and cleavage, e.g. boobs and butt cracks, are predominantly what I'm talking about here. So there are some images in this document that, while I feel like I can put on here and basically just give you fair warning through a content warning and the horror blog about metal, video games, and sex, should be a fair enough warning without me feeling like I have to age gate any of this, because I want this promotion to reach the largest audience that I possibly can. That being said, YouTube is run by AI, which is puritanical in ways that will automatically spot images that it deems arbitrarily to be not advertiser friendly, not family friendly. And through that Protestant ethic will slap me with a strike. It's happened before, it happens automatically, and it's not really something I feel like dealing with. So keeping all of that in mind, even though the images on here are ones you can access yourselves in a not age-gated way, and I consider them to be incredibly tame through purposes of sex education, art history, and anti-fascism, I'm still going to be skipping them or basically cropping them out as we go, just to keep YouTube off my back. All of that being said, let's get started. Interview with the Vampire, retracing my steps post-book series to recall how I got here. April 27th, 2026. I spent so much time on Gothic as a part of my life. It feels odd to admit that I've never written a full autobiography, only bits and bobs, in my own book series. To compensate, this video series retraces our steps, interview with the vampire walking backwards, to tell you a story that, like Shelley's Frankenstein, can only be told backwards, my usual writing style. And given I've written so many books at this stage, I can afford to be more poetic, conversational, and abridged when talking about my increasingly vampire self post hoc, a sanguine calculus, if ever there were. Source Persephone's academic history from about the author. See also on Giving Birth, 2023. Interview with the Vampire, though, written here, introduction-wise, takes place primarily on YouTube. In doing so, it documents my YouTube and academic work from 2014 to 2022, meaning everything that led up to writing my book series and conceptualizing Gothic gay anarcho-communism as a trans woman. To start with, initially inspired by recently reaching out to Andrew Rakich, aka Atun-Shei Films, about their upcoming vampire movie, doing so got me reflecting about my work on vampirism, or state vampirism, 2026, and how I currently wound up where I'm at, paradoxically writing about vampires when they're not even historically my favorite monster, re modularity and class, 2024. In doing so, it makes up the opening to my next volume, doing so hot on the heels of my last one, Volume 5, Holistic Study, or, for the promo series, The Sphinx's Riddle. This introduction post, apart from being the YouTube videos I complete, list and update at the bottom, shall introduce the idea and its immediate inspirations, Atun-Shei and Orleans, followed by older past elements too. Doing so means my past, but also that of other women, namely Mom, Anne Rice, Mary Shelley, and Medusa, or her avatars, more like. Table of Contents. Note, I've expanded Interview with the Vampire since first publishing, table of contents included, and while I've made numerous changes throughout, the clear and obvious addendums are in bold and color-coded. Pers. 4/29/2026. P.S. 5/2/2026. I recognized the essay contents shifting larger sections around. I also did the footnotes and made various small changes throughout, more citations and visual aids. Postscript, I expanded on holistic struggle to include a polemic, one made in response to Angela Benedict's dubious Goth has a brain rot problem, 2026. Concerning state vampirism, disclaimers, setup, the gist, this series as it unfolds, the videos, on interviewing vampires and staking them, ghastly invitations, a letter from the vampire, or my initial message to Atun-Shei, just the tip, or what's to come, summarizing the rest of the series, foreplay, or what's at stake, there's some whores in this house, re sex workers ahead, and the strength we draw from our fellows, or the book volume this series shall inevitably become, re the Sphinx's Riddle, re postscript, arrows from my quiver, from quality beyond measure, remembering Jonathan Joss, 2025, vampires, our poetic focus here, and a sticky one, on holistic struggle, healing the world from different positions within it, featuring Angela Benedict, regarding arrows from my quiver, is given to me by my Irish Mallee partner and contributing ecologist Bay Ryan, and co-writer, co-editor in my book series above, see disclaimer, showing me indigenous struggles alongside disabled, trans, and neurodivergent sex worker ones. Meeting people already radicalized by generational trauma and systems of oppression can radicalize you in turn, including through stories and ghosts, collectively reversing abjection. We are all Medusa's children, paving the way forward to a better post-scarcity world, i.e. in pre-capitalist language, married to modern methods, rejecting state vampirism in different playful ways, nonetheless guided by academic theory amid the fun being had. Doing so cites them alongside other activists and academics. These include ostensibly straight allies like Atun-Shei, Ted Stormer, Skip Intro, and Freda, etc., alongside openly queer ones like Essence of Thought, John the Duncan, Not a Twink, above. and Bridget Empire as familiar faces, i.e. alongside new ones mid-mask, like Ashley Adamson, I'm only just learning about, all of whom I'd love to include, provided they're willing to stand side by side with a Gothic cum dumpster. Orc or drow, goblin or warg, one doesn't simply walk into Gondor without friends, but we dark wizards of forbidden knowledge also don't all know each other. Capital alienates. We do share a common enemy and larger goal, so try as I might to rally others to my banner, the cause of Gothic gay anarcho-communism, e.g. with Bridget Empire below, remember to do the same for you and yours, in a decentralized scheme, without singular heroes, kings, or state apologists, i.e. during a shared struggle in duality towards universal liberation, one walking away from Omelis and its standard to token defenders. Whatever you call it, take what's useful here and leave the rest. Source Ski, Vanderwoord Art, 4/29/2026, and Bridget Empire's Affirmation, 5/4/2026. Essay in Rememory, on tyrants and their charm, or sacking Troy from within while castrating Nazi strongmen. A mini-essay about vampires, capital, and nation-states from outer space, featuring Stalin, Superman, DBZ, and Invincible, etc. Making Trouble, Cryptonomy Style, Anne Rice, Bloodlines, and Charting New Destinies in the Blood, or The Rememory of Older Mothers, featuring Mom. Concerning state vampirism, this piece, essay or otherwise, is part of a larger series on state vampirism. Artist Karen B. cited The World as a Vampire. As I conceive it, state vampirism, feeding through the state mid-abjection, be it openly capitalist or Marxist-Leninist. These are largely questions of aesthetic, whose Promethean, self-destructive function extends to other configurations of Omelis, e.g. Zionism. Furthermore, those overlap between my anti-Zionist work and my work critiquing Marxist-Leninism, state vampirism alongside capital, so consider reading both. Abjection being that which state predation and revolutionary action both rely on to function, i.e. on the aegis, as something to further or reverse mid-vampirism through paid-unpaid labor, re. me, vis-a-vis Julia Kristeva. To that, abjection, us versus them, alienation, and fetishization, is one of four main Gothic theories my book series utilizes, the other three being hauntology, retrofuture, cryptonomy, show-hide, and chronotopes, time-space, alongside smaller theories, e.g. Gerald Hogel's Ghost of the Counterfeit and Barbara Creed's Monstrous Feminine, Gorgons and Amazonamachia, as I study it. As a queer sex worker and academic, I dialectically materially prioritize abjection and vampirism through unpaid labor, chiefly sex work as exploited by Cartesian dualism and its harmful, maximalist binaries under capitalist realism, treating nature as monstrous feminine, re. nature is food. But mention the other theories too. Access four main Gothic theories, the 4 Gs, and paratextual documents for their longer definitions. In essence, capital the state raped by design, which unpaid labor prevents by breaking capitalist realism mid-abjection, i.e. reversing abjection during Little Gothic BDSM rape play when having the whore's revenge, which state vampirism explores at length. To break the profit and productivity motive by making a world for which it and rape are no longer possible using these methods, i.e. by using the same demonic and slutty language capital does, but at cross purposes. Source Rape Reprise, 2024. Goes to the Counterfeit, referring to raising awareness. See footnote number 1. Disclaimers. Interview with the Vampire is part of my Sex Positivity book series, which continues after its June 2025 finale and small-form content, e.g. essays on and interviews with other sex workers, all of whom I credit on my acknowledgements pages and sex work page. This piece doesn't focus on sex work itself, but widespread exploitation, i.e. in a shared predatory system, whoring nature and workers out in highly abject ways. Artist Laughed, Bay Ryan, Write, Persephone Vanderwoord. Sex Positivity versus Sex Coercion or Gothic Communism. On my inner book cover. Liberating Sex Work Under Capitalism Through Iconoclastic Art, first edition, written and illustrated by Persephone Vanderwoord, with her original artwork and art for this book made in collaboration with fellow sex workers and artists, edited and co-written by Bay Ryan, shown here. Over 4,000 illustrations and exhibits, contains academic, erotic, and triggering materials for purposes of critiquing capital, organized religion, for promoting non-coercive sex education, and for providing parody transformation of canonical works. Copyright at the time, 2025, vanderwoodart.com. For the visually impaired, I read this essay out loud on my YouTube channel. Disclaimer regarding essay contents: all opinions are my own, i.e. as part of my research conducted alongside my book series Gothic Communism. The material within is written speaks about public figures and popular media for purposes of sex education, satire, transformation, and critique, hence falls under fair use regarding copyright and free speech regarding defamation/obscenity laws, the Miller Test. Source: justice.gov. Click here for my entire series disclaimer. Lastly, many of the links on this page lead to my age-gated 18 and up website, where my entire work on Gothic communism is stored and exhibited. Content warning: classical artistic nudes, oil paintings, female nipples, bikini-style pinups and cleavage, e.g. boobs and butt cracks, fascism, genocide and rape, police brutality and carceral violence, queerphobia of different kinds, and Gothic poetry and violence, especially vampires and blood, for you squeamish out there. Meaning, from my definition of rape, to disempower someone or somewhere, a person, culture, or place in order to harm them, generally through fetishizing and alienizing acts or circumstances, socio-material conditions that target the mind, body, and or spirit. Rape can be of the mind, spirit, body, and or culture, the land or things tied to it, during genocide, etc. It can be individual and or on a mass scale. Source: psychosexual martyrdom. Concerning keywords, my arguments rely on various keywords I've previously coined, which here present in bold while color-coded, usually only once while stressing their keyword status, e.g. Little Gothic BDSM, Metroidvania, or the Palliative Numinous, etc., while some are given here in abridged form. Paratextual Gothic documents provides all neologisms in full. Set up the gist. This series, as it unfolds, the videos. D. Reynolds: what is Nightcrawlers? Dennis Reynolds: it's a game where they crawl around in the night like worms. Charlie Kelly: I never said that. Frank Reynolds: yeah, well, that's what it is. The Gang: It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, 2005. My larger book series is a shelf of brains and glass jars, concentrically arranged but also interconnected through a variety of endless abnormal pathways, surgical but madly so, a Hamlet-level method to said madness, to embrace decay among the midden, but also, like Shelley's highly undervalued Last Man, consider the beautiful side of such things, enhanced while the world decays, e.g. this dog who loves trains riding a train. Moreover, this video series is largely set, i.e. as I am working with a pre-made body of work, the book volume will include, fixated ritualistically on the monstrous feminine damsel as Fort Fatale, e.g. Amazons and Gorgon's Pareidolia above. But I shall choose from it as I wish. As I do, and as I record a given section for YouTube, I shall read it here and update this section. To it, here's the rough scaffold for what the video series shall entail, which the Sphinx's riddle will ultimately either provide for the written portions, or link to for the video portions in Volume 5 when it releases, to be added, expanded on. Stay tuned. My older body of work and YouTube videos, symposiums. My older work, all of this shall appear in the book volume. Each post I shall read out loud in a video, ones that are half a reading portion and a portion where I opine, reminisce about what I'm reading. Sex, Metal, and Video Games, January 30th, 2021. A good outline of what we'll be going over. As I write in my older body of work, I study horror, but have chosen over the years to focus on these three topics. They were a large part of my interests growing up and continue to guide my research going forward. This post explores my introduction to them and why I continue to devote my time and energy in exploring their Gothic potential. Alien Isolation sequel, name unknown. When we look at my work on Alien Ore and Alien Isolation, we'll consider this upcoming sequel to Creative Assembly's 2014 classic. Source: Abiyan Khan's Alien Isolation sequel teaser trailer reveals first look at the game, 2026. Source: Persephone Vanderwood's IGN Alien Isolation Review Introspective, 2014. Back when I still had facial hair. On interviewing vampires and staking them. So a vampire can cry. The Reporter, Interview with the Vampire. This series, written and video, is about vampires and interviewing them, or someone who writes about them, but I digress. to interview vampires, any vampire, not just my gay-ass monologuing here, is to introspect, abject, and retroject, and confess, project this or that from state margins, partitions, relegating hell that iconoclasts decolonize. To it, this is hardly my first time at the wheel, e.g. back to Jadis's Dollhouse, 2024, but is the first time I'll be doing it outside my aforementioned book series, i.e. in a more safe-for-work format with all the gifts and curses Foresight offers to try and monetize and spread me and my friends' work as dark oracles telling on Rome, re in a compendium of older material to make up said series Volume 5 for holistic purposes, hence the title. To understand how I'm more vampiric than I care to admit, even if witches are more my style, Interview explores my older video essays on YouTube, e.g. on Alien Isolation, my defense of the game, and personal review, and the Babadook, but also undergraduate work, graduate work, and symposiums in the mid-2010s, followed by my interview series in Alien Or, a love for horror media tied to YouTube and my horror blog, which I formed in 2015 and eventually had to use for grad school, e.g. my blog posts on the 2013 British zombie show In the Flesh, below. Exhibit 0. Source Left in the Flesh, Season 1 Review, Part 1, 2018. Model and artist, Wright, Autumn Ivy, and Persephone Vanderward. Zombies are weak, strong, the way that Amazons are, and Superman as we'll see. The paradox of exposure through victim-avenger fantasies that fascinate on alienation as fetishized, abject, and ultimately cryptonymic, showing and hiding different things through competing monstrous feminine appeals, used all the world to stage by good and bad actors in a shared masquerade. In doing so, I want to give you, dear reader, a special chance to reflect, meaning in ways vampires classically can't, or zombies for that matter, categorically brain-dead and or hunted as homo sacer by equally, if diametrically dehumanized death dealers. That is, queer folk are treated as invisible, despite having a vault of theatrical codes to paradoxically draw upon, making us both performatively overdressed and epistemologically anemic on the aegis, with Athena's mirror shield having a vampiric quality I've written extensively about regarding Medusa, RE state vampirism, cryptonomy, and abjection, composing my corpus on Little Gothic BDSM. See concerning rape play, a 2025 note on my development of Little Gothic BDSM. But we needn't be so blind, and I want to explain how and why as tied to my own work on vampires and witches, which I frankly tend to identify more with, specifically how it evolved into itself. Rome wasn't burned in a day, but it also happened with people participating in ways they aren't always master or even fully aware of. The closet. Again, the state is white, straight, and male, re understanding vampires, meaning to modular degrees that draw upon imprecating persecution language, re idle hands, 2024, i.e. that iconoclasts camp in duality to reverse abjection, echo state vampirism, by using dead metaphors, often Freudian, weak, strong ones, that we effectively grave rob poach for ourselves. Gary Oldman's got nothing on my transformation, below. Exhibit 63A from Half Real Recognizing and Performing Empathy, Me Still in the Closet, and Long Before I Came Out, from Kurt Russell to Jesus to Johnny Cash, in under a week, and whose pull would only compound as time went on, below, meaning I wasn't born wicked, but made that way through a variety of other baddies feasting on me, going from once bitten twice shy to give me some sugar baby, minus their unironic predation. Exhibit 1, Laughed Artists, Top, Zool, and Persephone Vanderward in Manchester, England, 2018, cited Non-Magical Detectives, 2025. Bottom, Jadis and Persephone Vanderward, cited Going Mask Off, Showing Jadis's Face, 2025. Middle, artist J. Scott Campbell, right, Kubu and Persephone Vanderward, cited Returning to Volume 1, 2 years later, and give or take, after 5 books, or Kubu's hand informing Little Gothic BDSM. As I write in Dead on Arrival, sometimes you slay the pussy, and sometimes the pussy slays you. Nerds fuck, enjoy monsters regardless of sex and gender. I've explored my ex's abuses of me in the past, but also what they taught me and gave me to weather future storms. To it, whatever slings and arrows or vampire's curse initially received from this Salem's lot, I took and turned into a gift to pay forwards. RE flow equals function, not aesthetic, and I'm using my scars to reverse abjection with, the undead are, if not anything else, curiously weak-strong, doing so much heavy lifting through the poetic power they offer as fresh fertilizer and creation. True birth happens after exiting the womb, what transfolk call a second puberty with gender-affirming care, and Superman fertilizing Earth like some hellish sperm. Our focus here is vampires. Tied to my life and times, the girl who wrote State Vampirism and how she got there is a late bloomer in adulthood, going from good girl Dorothy Gale, a 90s neurodivergent theater kid, budding sexologist, and awkward loner with few actual, non-imaginary friends, and one who loved Alien, Castlevania, and Metroid, to total Betty Alphaba Throp having the horse revenge at about 12 years, after her 20s, and not including childhood, which we'll also discuss, by putting the pussy on the chain wax, as my book series and latest volume borrows from Key and Peele. The Black Mirror is certainly a powerful device, one to expose all manner of bad actors in ways we reclaim upon ourselves, scratching our foes to see how they bleed and cry. The magic mirror argument, e.g. essay number 10.5, Black Moderates Don't Challenge Fascism, re. The Birdman, 2026. Matter shapes consciousness, consciousness maintains matter, and on it goes. But something's always troubling the portrait in question, a fatal one below. Something's either missing, sinister, or off, smiling at the gods in highly absurd ways, Camus style. Eat 'em and smile. I digress. Before we dive into the essay half about states and criticizing them mid-memory, a love letter, let's give my original letter to Atun-Shei and series summary alongside some other stuff, re. What's at stake. As we do, remember that vampires equal gay ninjas, or a Trojan horse path into the house in weird, hot, uncanny ways, what Freud called unheimlich, i.e. payback's a bitch, both ensconced in darkness visible, and more accustomed to seeing while under conditions of state alienation and persecution. A Superman to prop up and stake, per witch hunt, these Stygian waters, have fascists and commies sharing the stage, bodies and costumes, swimming in sticks. Eat your heart out, sinners. Whores are phantasms, then, that announce themselves in hard-to-believe ways above. Imagine wearing your normal alien outfit during a Halloween party and fake blood, also above, e.g. like Dracula or Superman, but also Medusa, the OG whore, re. Always a Victim, 2025. See also Elizabeth Hadley's More Than a Monster, Medusa Misunderstood, 2024. Sex work is generally abject, so these kinds of theatrical pretenses allow people the chance to dress up and engage in highly preferential and magnetic code, i.e. sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and also pulp media at large, re. Gothic equals trash. So shall we abject state ideals of power as something to prescribe, going where power is to unmask and critique its secret identity, with on tyrants focusing not just on Superman below, but various Radcliffean offshoots of the same highway banditry's Caesarean numinous, re. Camping the Cannon, but specifically interrogating power through your own camp. Ghastly Invitations, a letter from the vampire, or my initial message to Atun-Shei. I'm the Prince of Phantoms. My telepathic powers weave you in my spell. James Riviera, to sleep, perchance to scream, from Nosferatu, 1989. Source thumbnail, interview with the vampire, inviting Atun-Shei Films to interview him, review his upcoming work, 2026. See also source Skeet on the Richmond VA Poe Museum and other aspects of my Gothic past, and routinely re-exploring it from Vanderward Art 4/26/2026. So if you click on those, this is what I'm referring to, the Poe Museum, Richmond, Virginia. This is the thumbnail to the video in question, including Hark a Vagrant, who I think is awesome. I added it here because I felt like Jules Verne writing to Edgar Allan Poe, Atun-Shei vis-a-vis moi, and my book series in response to their upcoming film, The Vampires of New Orleans. And in reference to the Poe Museum, when I skate about it, I also include some photos. Me at the Poe Museum, Richmond, Virginia. I'm wearing a Halloween t-shirt and facehugger mask while crossing my arms inside a black coffin, part of the exhibit Buried Alive. Atun-Shei wearing Nazi millspec adorned with Goetic symbols. And exhibit 75A, photos from monster camp throughout, Mid-right, Dr. Cole and his robot from Cuphead. Far top left and middle left, photos of yours truly mingling with other attendees, with my photo of David Bennett, top left, showing him how to do the handshake from Predator, and of which he had no idea what I was referring to. Alas, I would eventually investigate Bennett and his band Steam-Powered Giraffe for sex crimes, already ruling the slum. From Toxic Schlock Syndrome, 2025. And then we have further photos from the Poe Museum. A portrait of Mr. Poe from the Poe Museum, taken by me. Photo of the photo, not the portrait. Poe's waistcoat and socks. A fan's bust of the man himself by David Richardson, 2017. And Pluto the Void Kitty, a local celebrity and cared for by the museum's owners, sunning himself majestically on the ground. This series started with a letter, that is, from Frankenstein to Dracula. Vampire stories, or things comparable to vampire stories, typically begin as such, i.e. secret missives that, unto themselves and everything they entail composite-wise, reference this or that in epistolary ways that go in and out of fashion, e.g. Anne Rice's famous novel from 1975, which I knew better from its 1994 film adaptation with Cruise and Pitt above. Needless to say, the tropes were all present and accounted for when I, like Girl Dracula to Jonathan Harker, reached out to Atun-Shei and gave them something interesting to write in their diary, so I want to include that here before proceeding deeper in. Atun-Shei. My name is Persephone Vanderward, and I'm a Gothic academic, author, and critic, trans sex worker, and activist who specializes more recently in vampire poetics, i.e. as metaphor for state predation mid-abjection, i.e. state vampirism. I wanted to ask if there's a place to watch your upcoming vampire film, The Vampires of New Orleans, meaning either in part or in full. As I value the work you do greatly, this includes your work on animal rights, anti-racism, and indigenous struggles, but also Gothic as a whole. One Gothic nerd to another, I would very much like to review The Vampires of New Orleans, or interview you about it as part of my state vampirism compendium concerning your hybrid academic meets theater kid approach. For context, I recently saw you announce your upcoming vampire flick, and it piqued my interest. Ari. Vampire movies can be creepy, sexy, atmospheric, and fun. They're rarely legitimately frightening. Y'all have no idea what's about to hit you. Good lord, this movie's gonna blow your socks off. Me. You know what, mister? I'll take you up on that. When it releases, I'll review it and add the review to my work on critiquing capital, state vampirism. In other words, vampires equal undead, and the undead are a metaphor for capital, specifically its feeding through trauma, mid-abjection, Ari, from Julia Kristeva, 1980. Frankly, they have been since before Marx, Ari Medusa and whores, the world's oldest profession, ergo labor struggle, but certainly after him and his famous specters, dialectical material critique. This ranges from myself and my work in the 2010s and 2020s, but also Creed and Derrida in 1993, George Romero in the 1960s and 70s, and Matheson in 1954 in similar works, e.g. Body Snatchers or The Thing from Another World, etc. Lugosi's 1932 White Zombie as arguably the first zombie film in the modern sense, see Attack of the Bourgeois Brain Eaters, 2004, not including Wales Frankenstein from a year prior, all of them preceded by Marx's Gothic paraphernalia in the late 1800s. 1848 with his Manifesto and Spectres, in 1867 with Capital and Vampires, and Tout le Monde beaten to the punch by Mary Shelley's seminal teenager 1818 novel Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, which I recall you covering yourself in The Sexual Politics of Frankenstein, though I haven't seen it yet. As I've written on extensively after finishing my book series, whose undead module dedicates to zombies, vampires, and other undead poetics. In Gothic, there's also an overarching element of vaudeville and exploitation, which liberation shares the same language, bodies, and costumes with in duality, thus speaks subsequently to your tactical frivolity, clowning theatrically on fascism, reversing abjection, me vis-a-vis Kristeva, but also Creed's monstrous feminine, by literally wearing Nazi mil-spec outfits in your own work. The bash the fash approach, a kind of tongue-in-cheek kayfabe that takes fetish gear and uses it ironically for revolutionary purposes versus classically false or counter-revolutionaries, e.g. Mercedes the Muse, versus someone like Autumn Ivy, see toxic schlock syndrome, i.e. reactionary/moderate and centrist stories under Bretton Woods and neoliberalism decaying towards fascism under capitalist and socialist realism. It's all cut from the same proverbial cloth, which has value in monstrously poetic ways, i.e. from Tolkien to us, specifically me and my friend's work, camping the canon through the monstrous feminine, from Beowulf, the monsters and the critics, to my own body of work, camping Tolkien's canon while drawing on his Tolkien side, i.e. my Tolkien scholarship, 2025, witches are monsters, and monsters have power the state cannot exclusively control, i.e. through violence, terror, and morphological expression as two-way streets, i.e. the state its key tools. Source, Dead on Arrival, footnote 12. Artist Mercedes the Muse, alongside Atun-Shei. To conclude and reiterate, I would like to see your work and synthesize it to my larger corpus thereof, i.e. state vampirism. Feel free to reply with the necessary details if you wish to take part. I also do horror interviews if you'd like to do something more conversational, e.g. Alien Or 2019 Q&A. Kaylee and Sam meet the directors. Yours, Persephone. I know what foreplay is, and when someone is selling something they're proud of, their penis or otherwise, to follow their lead, or top from below. I chose the latter, if only because I didn't want to scare Atun-Shei off. But therein lies the rub, the lonely vamp looking for connection, and accidentally spooking someone else who isn't as freaky as they are. It happens, or maybe in this case, Atun-Shei will come to my castle and have a look around. Fingers crossed. I admire their purity as far as their work is gothically mature, and combats tokenism as I study it, i.e. regarding tokenism and fighting it, 2025. In the interim, let's discuss what's to come if you step inside. And to clarify, Atun-Shei did actually accept my invite, and I will be interviewing them closer to the film's completion sometime in September or October, but that remains to be seen. Just the tip, or what's to come, summarizing the rest of the series. Is it in yet? Something many penis havers don't want to hear, unironically. Foreplay exhausted, this area of the series' introduction remains just the tip of the vampire's fangs or witch's broom, merely the insertion of what any vampire, strongman or otherwise, can only hint at, and which the essay have shall go a bit deeper than the videos and older materials themselves do. From there, and using an episodic style that Marilyn Roxy always told me to use, and one I mostly avoided after 2022, the rest of this series' videos will dole out piece by piece echoes of Osiris and similar underworld stories. One aspect of my gay academic past per meal. It includes various anecdotes too, interspersed between my older essays and blog posts as I cover them, e.g. my love life and meeting cuties who radicalized me, all in a safe work if censored format, of course. In videos that follow, again primarily on YouTube, we'll read from my older body of work and YouTube videos, Symposiums, 2026. Will be semi-chronological, though I may jump around a bit, probably starting with sex, metal, and video games, 2021, i.e. as it outlines much of what we'll be talking about, followed by my aforementioned Alien Or series, as it highlights an interest in indie horror media tied to Atun-Shei, my return to my roots, where my interviewing the entire cast and crew of Or had to be approved by Fox, but remaining part of my post-grad work all the same. Artist Gamisoku cited Following in Medusa's Footsteps, meeting Medusa. In doing so, I'm bridging the past, present, and future by giving you the secrets of the vampire and similar beings above. How I learned to do two things at once, namely consume Gothic media as trashy and thought-provoking in the same breath, we psychosexual bimbos from outer space, giving and taking as needed, speaking to an uphill overcoming of congenital to comorbid damage, also above. Knowing what I know after I walk backwards into hell once more, only to find it waiting for me on my return, perhaps I'll have saved you a trip in the bargain, or encouraged you to enter hell yourselves. Time is a circle, the Gothic and its Promethean quest, and our Faustian bargain, going in and out of the past, to make concentric labyrinths, me sun and bime. Consider this your vampire's vanity, but also Ariadne's thread, working with shadows to break capitalist realism on the ages. Yours. It's beautiful, yes, but also paradoxically ugly and numinous, tied to bigger things eating us that we can't see below. Source, Anthony Bresnikan's The Undying Mystery of Matt Schreck, the first Nosferatu, 2024. The two go hand in hand, speaking to interesting lives and times that most only hear about under capital, in which Gothic revives in small, vampires or otherwise, the blood admittedly grossing me out, but also drawing me operatically in, Dayman, fighter of the Nightman. Vicarious or otherwise, use what I holistically impart here to change the world for the better. Predation is predation, but who is preying on whom? Gothic concerns the social and antisocial at odds. What prison abolitionist Mumia al-Jamal describes to FD Signifier as follows: something to use for liberatory purposes, or which capital and the state will use against us for destructive purposes. Timestat 1753. RE states' rights versus worker rights on all registers, the movement of money, a form of theft through nature, the stopping of which is death for capital and the state. RE Patel and more, see State Vampirism, footnote 1. But death is nothing to us. Getting ourselves or others pregnant, that female Gothic, as Moores put it, but foisted onto male and intersex bodies too. So suck what must be sucked, ravish and hyphenate this or that in duality to deconstruct, defy, and disrupt the state's singular interpretations and monopolies, turning their worlds upside down. RE the horse revenge during Little Gothic BDSM, chasing palliative numinous forces to fight fire with fire. You have all the power to do so, born with it in ways that predate God and capital. RE Medusa versus Caesar and his goons, fleecing them by flaying them alive. If it bleeds, we can kill it, too. For a ghost, you bleed just fine. Gentle or strict, try something different, new for you, if not others, and see if the shoe fits, or proverbial crown of thorns, below. Loretta Vamps cited Gothic ambivalence, canonical torture in their internet age, 2025. Foreplay, or what's at stake? That's one letter down. You've got the gist. But before we get to the SAF, the love letter, let's talk more about what's at stake, so to speak, and why vampires are so vital at hitting upon the core issues of capital. To that, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, vampires aren't my favorite monster, a truth universally acknowledged that I never bothered to question until now. Why was I sinking my teeth into them time and time again? To spread it, mount it, pin it, as lepidopterists sometimes put it. Sadly, the truth on the other side isn't always sexy. Above, artist Axel Ross cited modularity and class. Turns out, however, vampires aren't just the perfect metaphor to critique and skewer capital with, pimps and whore, but also the state and Marxist-Leninism's shortcomings, i.e., whore equals vampire as performative critical device, actor, the model, and the master. This involves a variety of whores, and those salacious things for which they stand for against pimps. There's some whores in this house, RE sex workers ahead. To my readers, consider this image the Cerberus guarding our underworldly and cemetery gates. If you can't handle this, now's the time to bow out. Persephone Vanderward in the initial dedication to Bay Ryan for Volume 0. About that, as I told Atun-Shei in my video to him, timestamp 1343, there be sex workers. To it, this series, despite being as safe for work as possible, still covers sex workers, queer folk, and other unpaid labor divorced from privilege by the universal class subject, as white, straight, paid, and male, under a Protestant ethic, RME vis-a-vis John the Duncan, see State Vampirism footnote 1, and a Gothic researcher responds, timestamp 13955. To that, what do you think vampires are? Bastards? Destroyers? Homewreckers? Imposters? Criminals? Pirates? Terrorists? Witches? And yes, whores, but also gay icons dishing counter-terror out, e.g. Gary Oldman or Christopher Lee, etc., as theater nerds who, despite being straight, still speak to queerness, prurience, lie burial, hypnosis, feeding, and boners. All the usual puns, oxymorons, what have you, meaning ways. We queers psychosexually do, bad to the bone, al dente, and so on. The Gothic's usual hyphenation of sex and death, bodies and castles, sickness and food, mouths and teeth, etc. Artist Alicia Bay, source, The Price of Rice in China. But it's not just one of us in a smaller community of singular freaks. We are legion, a confederacy of communal bloodsuckers sucking this or that. Source, Yesterday's Leftover Rice, 2026. Artist, top left to bottom right, Safe for Work version, Hallie Cross, Darling, Puppy, Bat, Puppy Tycho, Jail, Ryder K, Clockwork Rickspin, Lilith May, Fishman, Housepet, Popstar Darina, and Cosmo Wanderlust. So, parody and pastiche. I'll refer conversationally to my sex worker companions, the creatures of the night, what sweet music we make, e.g. their interviews and times to shine on my book covers, making my work all the better in the bargain. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Let's bottle those tears, shall we? Model and artist Maddie Minx and Persephone Vanderwart. Model and artist Maddie Minx and Persephone Vanderwart. We'll also probably cite my book series a little, though I will try to keep that to a minimum. Instead, Interview explores again primarily my older works from 2014 to 2022, conversationally interjecting my historical readings of said pieces with bits of color, as most of this is on YouTube, reading from said essays while recalling different stories about them and horrors. Between the reading portions, may its eating turn your lips and other things red, the color of desire and passion, but also arousal below. Whatever the fluid, paint your own canvases and weave your own spells. R.A. Blake's Heaven in a Wildflower, from Auguries of Innocence, 1803, describing as I see it, 2024, fire flowers, sideways smiles, what have you, us feeding endlessly, but also collectively into a brave new world, a house of horrors, blushing with joy at confronting profound things through the sensibilities involved, tumescence, or what randier academics might call jouissance or frisson, meaning orgasmic or skin orgasm tied to numinous things. For the smell of desire, refer to the Sex Panther scene from Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, 2004. It smells like Bigfoot's dick. Maybe Jordan Peterson wears some. Remember those pulse points, love? Under those goofy suits he sells, all while endlessly complaining about women in the workplace, postmodern neo-Marxists, and anything else under the sun that invariably makes him cry like a little bitch until the sun burns out. Speaking to Austin's sense and sensibility, meaning reason and feeling personified by that story's sisterly heroines of manners, 1811, A is used by state powers, like so many things, to divide women into tame, wild, obedient, unruly virgin whores. All our conventions to dig up and play with, as Austin did, lampooning Gothic while still writing her own Gothic pastiche, Northanger Abbey, written in 1803, but released posthumously in 1817, only for Austin to be outlawed by Anne Radcliffe, the mother of Gothic novels, R.A. Radcliffe's Refrain, 2024, and crafter of the famous Black Veil, horror-terror binary, released after her death, See on the Supernatural in Poetry, 1826, and Explain Supernatural, Austin's replica was poking fun of. Yes, pretty well, but they are all horrid. Are you sure they are all horrid? Source, Northanger Abbey, cited Shining a Light on Things, 2023. To quote the great enchantress herself, and go on a bit of a tangent before the next section, terror and horror are so far opposite that the first expands the soul and awakens the faculties to a high degree of life, the other contracts, freezes, and nearly annihilates them. And where lies the great difference between terror and horror, but in the uncertainty and obscurity that accompany the first respecting the dreaded evil? Source. I dissect and praise her at different points, and do so before my book series even started, 2022, but I digress, playing with what I call the palliative numinous as something to literally fuck with, super freak style, above. So often Radcliffe's dreaded evil was simply a scapegoat for capital state vampirism she would delay for hundreds of pages, R.E. The Black Veil, a Udolpho, 1794, being a 500-page MacGuffin. It's merely the aegis as something for horrors to embody and reclaim, i.e. by reversing objection goes to the counterfeit, to decolonize Gothic terror monopolies upon ourselves, a process of fakery that, in our hands, undoes Western lies and sovereignty and non-zero-sum games. Horror is ubiquitous in Gothic. Someone the state legitimately fears in ways we homewreckers can leverage against our would-be pimps, the stuff of nightmares and dreams made flesh. It bears repeating that Gothic was penned by women without rights and closeted gay men, which open secret horrors cis-het or otherwise, white or otherwise, can camp as we wish, want, desire. We are delicious, but also ravenous, our public nudism and aesthetic, a half-real, monasterial fog-of-war buffer to wage as war from, a new term I coined, one that stresses the liberation of sex work through revolutionary struggle, e.g. hugging the horror's alien, seeking revenge, through unity illustrating mutual consent with other abjective workers, source paratextual documents. Nudity becomes strength, not weakness, through the paradox of exposure having the horror's revenge, i.e. in cryptonymically vampiric ways for unironically rebellious purposes, i.e. introducing revolutionary cryptonomy and transgressive nudism, footnote 10, sucking our power back while punching up through ace public nudism, interrogating trauma, see footnote 16. So we put rape in quotes during different vasovagal, ravisher fantasies that teach mutual consent as performance, re. Ludo-Gothic BDSM, and the uncanny per confused. Historically maladaptive survival mechanisms we paradoxically learn to control in safe spaces of danger to weaponize against our would-be pimps, i.e., a given danger disco as friend-foe and fight-flight, etc. See Healing from Rape and Paid Labor, but also Castles in the Flesh, 2024. Everyone loves the whore, but for different reasons, exploitation and liberation, meaning those that anisotropically and apotropaically share the same dualistic stages, bodies, and costumes between good actors and bad, the former which rely on a pauper's inventiveness and tramp-like easy charm to win the day and control the room, the latter resorting to superficial charm, money, and brute force. A fascination with power as classically erotic and phallic. Consider the Roman god Fascinus, and to fascinate, meaning stare in a hypnotic, studious manner, combating the evil eye, which applies to phallic women with snakes, one-eyed monsters of a Freudian sort, for hair, easily enough, often predator-prey stigma animals and skin colors, are prey as liberators, e.g. sharks and bats, of a property pest sort. A pimp's a pimp, the usual masters and madames, selling danger to the middle class, haunted by systemic abuse leaking from the bedroom. R.E., the ghost of the counterfeit, and Foucault's A History of Sexuality, explored by me in Understanding Vampires. But also from nature in voyeur exhibit ways. It's those damn sharks, can't you see? Source: YouTube thumbnail, Jaws, Nighttime Shark Attack film clip, own it on Brule, DVD and digital, 2012. In turn, these Gerasene scapegoats tied to different bugbears to scapegoat, including aquatic nightmares fetishized by Zionists, thereby continuing the older struggle under Pax Americana, or unpaid labor, by pimping nature as mantras feminine, in Cartesian heteronormative and secular colonial false flags, Darvo and obscurantism, monopolizing violence, terror, and sex monsters, R.E. Weber, Esprit, and me, see the stated key tools from paradoxical Gothic documents. Consider Spielberg and Jaws, a PG movie sold to kids in 1975 while depicting that 70s Bush of a given nameless damsel in distress above. Or Tolkien's infamous orcs and goblins while men fight over ladies and land, meeting breeding rights, a white planet versus a black, under Goldilocks imperialism, gentrifying war per Tolkien's ludic cartographic refrain into the 1970s, R.A. Goblins, Anti-Semitism, and Monster Fucking, 2025. Here, the profit motive's Protestant ethic is, point of fact, Judeo-Christian, in ways that lampoon Catholics and Muslims alike under current neoliberal orders, all tied to imprecating persecution language and lady tramp or pauper prince correlating love, captive audience romances, R.E. Idle Hands and I'll See You in Hell, 2025. Gothic is dualistic, but also holistic in its mutilative desires. The dividing line between toxic and non-toxic, not sacred profane, which are merely value judgments, remains irony and consent. Artist Ludic01 cited Ladies First or the Grift of False Rebellion, 2025. On the strength we draw from our fellows, or the book volume this series shall inevitably become, R.E. the Sphinx's Riddle. I feel like a young, strapping lad beating his meat vigorously for the first time. Lord Slug, Team 4 stars. Dragon Ball Z abridged movie Lord Slug, 2011. Whatever comes next, this whorehouse is a composite, a Gothic communism, a non-profit endeavor that, despite my being unemployed, still consists of a patchwork bride made of different wicked ladies to form Gorgon Voltron. I don't tend to make much money from this project, because I put everything back into it, but it gives me and others strength all the same, in ways that routinely draw strength from while playing with dead things. Whatever we leave behind for others to find, use that as a pathway to look good, feel good about yourselves, chasing your own dragons to happy endings. Make a better world together, where whores can say yes or no, while free from judgment, scorn, or violence, and you give them what they want should they ask for it, as Ku often would below, not as unthinking mechanical things to outwit and exploit, but treat as equals, i.e. in a shared struggle that doesn't always work out at the time, but still leads to lovely things to remember and look back on with rueful fondness. Her tits were there, illustrating mutual consent through the dialectical material. Context each exchange depicts, E.T. Kubu being a GNC Marxist-Leninist who helped radicalize me even further below. Moments are magical, and while they don't last in the moment or after, we can preserve them and their value as best we can. Exhibit 2, artist and model far left, Persephone Vanderward. Source left, Do Chakayu, Karashi X, Kanjo, 2007, cited Illustrating Mutual Consent, Empathy, 2025. Artist and models right, Persephone Vanderward and Kuwu, model far right, Kuwu. Keep that in mind as we proceed. You're treading in the footsteps of divinity, Goldilocks Icarus. In turn, everything dies, so find joy in it, her tits were there, or butt, below. Meaning a ontology to plant new flags and flowers. Grow whatever you like, as long as it builds collectively towards intersectional consciousness, solidarity, and universal liberation. No homeless whores. Model and artist Blood Bunny and Persephone Vanderward. Source, my logo for Gothic gay anarcho-communism. Also with the Sphinx's riddle, I want to release a book volume appearing on its outer covers higher up. I one that catalogs but also engages with my older work in different ways, in future YouTube essays, recorded and released over the following months, to discuss things from the written to the oral, there and back again. It includes the written stuff, but also spoken accounts of me at the present space and time, that are more conversational and reflective years afterwards. Interview with the Vampire, then, mirrors the oral to the written, all to catalog and explore the guts of what Gothic communism ultimately became. I was, I am, I shall be. And like Rosa Luxemburg, shall not plead meekly with my conquerors, but rather become the apple and the tree bearing it, to dodge the rapist, face the axe they hold. The tree remembers. The paradox of exposure, the liberating sex workers from rape demands, not to struggle, as Frederick Douglass explains, but naked struggle, cryptonomy, and abjection, so you pray as liberators. To it, long and hard is the way that out of hell leads up to light. Medusa never dies, a shapeshifter like Milton's Satan. She only returns to haunt Europe and elsewhere in ways Marx could scarce imagine. They kettle us, gaslight, gatekeep, grobos. We clap back using what we have on the aegis, our bodies, our labor, and our art, to shout loudly and proudly from the rooftops, land back, labor back, sex back. It began with a whisper. Or as other specters impart along the same vampire's refrain of socio-material transference, above, land back, free Palestine, Sudan, Congo, Syria, Ethiopia, Cuba, Korea, Vietnam, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Turtle Island, Lebanon, and all occupied, oppressed, embargoed land. Give to mutual aid. Learn about the indigenous nation whose land you are on. Lead with kindness, but don't shy away from conflict. Always ask yourself who is being left out and why. It is almost always going to be disabled people, indigenous people, trans people, children. Start a garden, make some art, stay curious, don't obey rules that don't make sense, be loud about injustice, abolish ICE, abolish the police, abolish the government, all power to the people, and wear a mask and test for COVID. Source, Hailing Hellions, an interview with Delilah Gallo, 2025. We live in Gothic times, so go wild, babes. You have only to lose your chains and avoid a slow, agonizing death from state shift, aka climate change. But eye on the prize. Take these books and their prior synthesis and synthesize, post hoc, your own pandemonium. Better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. Medusa and her ilk, the queens of communism, that, rather than be impressed with or repressed by state power, shake their rattles the bones of the victorious dead as beings to dance with, unify mid-memory, above. Source, Exhibit 33B2, A1, B2C, Preface, Inside the Hall of Mirrors, 2024. Specifically a scene from Jordan Peele's Up. Not Up, that's a Pixar movie. Us. Survival is victory for women, queer folk, and other state targets, E.G. Billy from The Nightingale, telling his colonizers after killing the dastardly Captain Hawkins, the abuser of Claire, Billy's imperfect Irish friend, and the killer of Billy's own people, "I'm still here, white man." So says he, echoing her own "I'm Ireland," to defy those who raped her as part of a shared uneven struggle. Healing from rape, not to rank rape, but share the struggle through uneven ratios of privilege oppression, which doing so echoes, i.e. inside a hall of mirrors, insofar as everything sits within a cycle of imaginary history that plays out through an endless, genocidal mirroring that must, if it is to cease, be met with mirrors. Source, author's forward. Whatever side of the river sticks, we sand. Vampires seek and violently claim revenge, meaning the Avenger, a classic monstrous feminine device I embody alongside those of my friends, past and present, and shown to me by others below. From Quality Beyond Measure, remembering Jonathan Jaws. Postscript, arrows for my quiver. Terror is the kissing cousin of force, and real or implied, is never far removed from the pages of history. To define and condemn terror from a peculiar social, economic, political, and emotional plane is to display a self-righteous attitude that, totally unrealistic, is doomed to be disappointed by harsh facts. Source: Robert Asprey, War in the Shadows, 1975. As previously stated, Bay, being mildly Irish, constantly recommends me elements of indigenous cultures that jive with my own work on the monstrous feminine, i.e. they nerd-type me, and I put it in the book, Arrows for My and Our Friends' Quivers, e.g. the fire-stealing Polynesian god Maui, who the Maori worship, among others, from my words to the Birdman, from Dead on Arrival, but also Hinekira and the Pukina. Source: Pam Van Chaos, Facebook. Pam Van Chaos writes, "My elders taught me this is the most beautiful a woman can be, fierce in battle. Women will not extend their tongue in haka, and sadly flash the whites of our eyes like the hammerhead shark, who is known to fight fiercely even after death. I project the sacred marks of my ancestors on my chin forward, so that you can see who goes before me. I stamp my feet to rattle ancient bones and wake the spirits to come to arms. Every woman who came before me is at my back." Not unlike the Gorgon, nature as monstrous feminine argument I normally make. No, Avengers, gorillas, and pirates, but also the femme fatale and the monstrous feminine are all over Gothic. Turns out they're all over indigenous stories reclaiming their cultures too, to survive capital and take what the colonizer took back from them. Land, labor, and bodies, exploitation and liberation, appropriation and appreciation occupy the same half-real stages of a shared wisdom, i.e. of the ancients and the ancestors, both something, and in some shape or form, to reclaim from state predators of all different kinds, monopolizing or discounting us wholesale. Death by snoo indeed. We reverse terror, counter-terror, to serve our needs, and that of nature versus assimilation, which is poor stewardship. Nudity is strength, armor, and weapons, re darkness visible, below. They will call you violent, regardless, or ask you to destroy us. This was a question that weighed on me back in 2014 into 2024, when I finally came out and bared it all. I'm thought and rememory, full of trauma, appetite, and rage. My spells are orgasms. My hexes reek of power that can peel paint. Strip peaches of their skin to send your toenails growing inward. You mess with me? I shapeshift and impart fatal knowledge. I am Ilyana, hear me roar. I am Ravana, strong and brave. I am Persephone, daughter of Melody, granddaughter of Ellen, great-granddaughter of Mildred, the teeth in the night, the queen of the night, Titania and Tamora, and you do not scare me. Source: Facing Death, What I Learned, 2024. Hellbound yourselves, I am the witch telling you my story as it happened, sending you on your way, as my mother did before me, which we'll get to in the rememory portion. To that, I want to reiterate vampires, our poetic focus and lens through which holistic struggle is attained. Vampires are poetic focus here, and a sticky one. Undead exploitation under capitalism as a giant zombie vampire takes many different forms, themselves stuck inside a gradient of psychosexual abuse workers relay during liminal expression surfaces and thresholds. Per all the usual paradoxes, any sex-positive liberatory form of camp occupies the same performative shadow zone as any sex-coercive carceral form of canon. Source: Persephone Vanguard, That Which Is Not Dead, or Capitalism as a Giant Zombie Vampire, from the Undead module. Ibid. First things first. A quick note about vampires, our poetic focus and hermeneutic metric being somewhat sticky, as Blood Jet really is, but also sanguine, darkness visible, heat, etc. All poetry is, lest it become rigid and useless, less stiff in a useful sense, and more completely paralyzed, a zombie paperweight above, for others to feed on. Re, the state is canonically male, white, and straight, but also paid. Re, understanding vampires and paid labor. This means in ways the vampire can anisotropically uphold or not, doing so in cop, victim, predator, prey, owner, pet, terror, counter-terror ways, often female ones, centered around creation, but also anti-creation and damsel demon, see Harmony and the Xenomorph, further down. I.e., the Gorgon is a classic symbol of nature as monstrous feminine. One to pimp out of revenge, dressed up as progress to stymie reversals, see next section. Nudity equals scapegoat, but also anti-predation disruptor, cryptonymically listing their demands. Doing so through sexual to asexual public nudism, the vampire comments furtively on trauma as two-way street. The vice character's vice grip pussy, or ass, the left that dare not speak its name, breaking off whatever goes inside, turning gimme that dick into something of a menacing dare. It's what Gothic calls an argument, generally installed through tension of courtship with heretical ideas that manifest and convey otherwise unspeakable for the state notions. The myth of total power, decay of mastery, and civilized progress fought alongside a silent scream, castle in the flesh, and/or study in scarlet that little Gothic BDSM calculates accordingly. Through cryptonomy and abjection, risk and temptation are part and parcel, making a total furthering of abjection impossible, owing in no small part to capital's usual contradictions. There's always leverage to have the whore's revenge, however imperiled the vampire seems, dualistic as all monsters are, and loaded with gentle, strict energies. Cited Leaving the Castle, 2024. In space, no one can hear you scream. Progress equals televised spectacle out from older forms into the computer and later internet ages. A given tech race, arms or otherwise, all part of capital state vampirism, e.g. space, aka astronoetics, the colonial gaze of planet Earth, and a language of conquest mapping territory concentrically out. From the covenant of the rainbow, to Plato's Republic and Caesar, to divine right, to enlightenment, hypocrisy, and the Protestant ethic. Said ethic squanders home turf advantage, stolen land and labor, under bourgeois executives and governing bodies manifest destiny, all to ring the death knell of empire and the established neoliberal order towards something different. Vampirism is vampirism, the usual simulacra stay at play, however decayed or hyperreal they become, as charts like those Columbus once used to massacre the locals and rape the land. The modern map did not merely describe the world, it was a technology of conquest. Source: A History of the World in 7 Cheap Things, 2017. Such things can reverse technology used against a master-slave arrangement. One is perceived benefactor, and their rotting inheritance eventually sees a damned homecoming led by nature's mischief, the Imperium's pallbearers dancing for joy on the graves of state pimps laid low. Or as highlighted by Gil Scott-Heron, the revolution of technological spectacle definitely televised, and white supremacist, e.g. space cowboys, eventually cannibalized by profit sacrifice on the altar of neoliberal hegemony's so-called final frontier, or the Challenger disaster's link between profit and exploitation, war and peace, teaching, education, and crew as thoroughly expendable. See Unto the Breach, 2016. Whose Whitey's on the Moon, 1971, sums up the drive to hide behind the skirts of a national pride ethos, ignoring the systemic bigotries and stolen land spilled blood baked into such things. Few things get televised as much as the space race, moon or otherwise. Source: YouTube community post, Persephone Vanderward 4/29/2026, in response to Pillboy's Whitey's Back on the Moon, 2026. And yet, defense of the state is not homogeneous, I write elsewhere. Dissenters of the state and its abuse often coming from lovers of science and or military servicemen, i.e., where people are, as meeting them at, and speaking frankly to already frank opinions, e.g., piqued interests. The Untold Story of the Challenger Crew Cabin, 2026, discusses the science side of state predation, and Sector 7's The Time That I Killed, and Why I Doubt Other Veterans, discussing something equally uncomfortable/taboo, killing for the state, and counteracting fascist braggadocio as something to reify and perform accordingly. Source: Onto the Breach. For example, the Xenomorph, Aliens 1979 field slave stowaway, goes to the counterfeit on board Ridley's retrofuture Demeter, well, Nostromo, but same idea, as the plainly non-white, furious vampire, a lawn jockey offshoot of the numinous space jockey big chap that everyone remembers, but the silent partners, the evil companies signing people's checks and death warrants, feed invisibly on everyone, re crew expendable, Medusa the whore, and her endless trafficking their top priority, no matter how efficient and Promethean said profit is, or careful their proxies are. State vampirism gonna vampire. The universe is their oyster to shuck, Ozymandias style. We gotta shuck back, or land or otherwise. The classic femme forte, fatale, monstrous feminine, less reversing capital's curse and its trauma, and more breaking the cycle by shattering capitalist and socialist realism where it occurs. The Gothic and on and off stage are inherited confusions R.E. Baldrick, 2009. Whatever the device, payback's a bitch, but whose revenge is sweet. Mid Amazonomachia, R.E. Our Sweet Revenge, 2025. Female or not, our running theme here is vampires and blood-penetrative violence, though not focusing on the Freudian, explicitly gendered cis or otherwise aspects of vampiric strength and other saint-to-sinner virtues vices, e.g. vagina dentata, hysterical and phallic women, with harmony being agender above. It's also mad science, monsters and making them in superhuman ways, for versus state hegemony, which the mini-essay will cover. Such things aren't mutually exclusive. Furthermore, vampirism equals abjection, and abjection goes both ways. Canon versus camp during chaos personified is what we queers call a hot gay mess, in which vampires assemble, encapsulate very particular tropes, e.g. cruising and dungeons evoking sin, wrong lust, unmitigated torture, venereal disease, and excessive appetite, i.e. those that, in animal cases, sometimes have insect, parasitoid, and chattel vermin qualities that merge chimerically with various organism and monster types, e.g. the xenomorph basically Medusa, already undead, demonic, and animalistic, as fungal, phallic, wasp-like, witchy, and vampiric, a sex demon and walking sarcophagus hungry for brains, but also sex, to extirpate under a Puritan ethic. It's a wandering womb, hauntology, nightmare on legs, raping everyone in sight during live burial, a curse with one's eyes, Medusa style, and her weapon-like nudity, versus the Amazon's armor style, what the Mali call makutu, or witchcraft, to leverage against one's enemies. Here, the inadequacies of a purely material critique butt heads with the social side of things, the dark side of the moon for many a Marxist-Leninist, except dialectical materialism allows for the social and material in Gothic ways, which they simply take further than Marx did, i.e. making Marx gay. It's bound to get messy when pushing towards our final forms. Refer to Harmony's interview with me for my Hailing Hellions series, 2025. Source Geiger Xenomorph, 2025. To it, exactly classifying a given case sometimes falls apart, relies on the complicated, at times entropic reality riddled with stereotype. This means that while the undead historically hone on particular things, so can demons, as I categorize them, re a cruel angel's thesis. One sucks, feeding on trauma, the other fucks, dark desire, and vampires frankly do both equally well, i.e. known primarily as undead, or frankly having animalistic, transformative, and BDSM-flavored demonic qualities that, merged with their impressive raft, one boasting cultural metaphors ripped from history as half real, a Crash Course Introduction to Vampires and Witches, 2024, makes vampires the most morphologically complex and diverse of the three undead classes, vampires being non-stop punching bags that appear uncanny, endlessly ravenous, not unlike vampires, only more hungry and less sentient, and ghosts being ontologically strange, even numinous in telltale spectral ways. They're classy and cliché, beloved and done to death, and ghostly as well as animal, a given predator having misform, while also granting all manner of wishes in demonic, genie-like ways, invading the home. Furthermore, it's all a spectrum with different modules. These play out within Gothic, which hides and or builds upon various disordered pathways to speak to reality as sublime, absurd, numinous, weird, etc. The world, in capital and small, personifying different aspects of predation for different sides, with Geiger's Gothic surrealism touching on various drug-like things we don't have time to explore here. R.E. Fisher's acid communism and freaks of nature set loose from captivity to run wild once more. See Follow the White to Black Rabbit, or Magic Drugs and Acid Communism, 2025. The struggle is holistic. On Holistic Struggle, Healing the World from Different Positions Within It, featuring Angela Benedict. Descartes had not stumbled upon his revolutionary philosophy all on his own. The second law of capitalist ecology, domination over nature, owed much to Francis Bacon, 1561 to 1626, a philosopher widely credited as the father of modern science. That gender language will make sense in a moment. Bacon was also a prominent member of England's political establishment, at different times a member of Parliament and the Attorney General of England and Wales. He argued that science should, as it were, torture nature's secrets out of her. Further, the empire of man should penetrate and dominate the womb of nature. Science must hound nature in her wanderings, and you will be able, when you like, to lead and drive her afterwards to the same place again. Neither ought a man to make scruple of entering and penetrating into these holes and corners, when the inquisition of truth is his whole object. Bacon was a major political figure at a time when the lives of European women and all such extended beings under Cartesian thoughts thinking versus extended binary were being threatened, surveilled, and dominated in new and thoroughly modern ways. Source: Raj Patel and Jason Moore, A History of the World in 7 Cheap Things. Intersectional problems demand intersectional solutions, but also holistic study to get at things that normally self-disguise. What's at stake is something to carry out through the poetry and praxis of vampires, repeatedly over time with others by your side. Teamwork makes the dream work. Much of the interview was written based on feedback, i.e. from friends listening to me read, or enemies pushing back during de facto peer review. You, outsider, not part of planet's life. Cited, I'll See You in Hell, 2024. To that, capital of the state raped by design, pimping the planet is black, alien, the whore to blame per witch hunt. Radcliffe style, those meddling kids above, the state's little vampires, de facto cops chasing a given scapegoat of capital to its lonely birthplace and resting place, pulling the black veil of the great enchantress, Ari Radcliffe's refrain, decide to expose and kill the pirate. I versus nature as abject, monstrous feminine, under Cartesian thought, one of the qualities of capital alongside state monopolies of violence, terror, and monsters. As Gothic communism is a holistic discipline, challenging said rape and triangulation, our material goal here is eco-socialist, anti-racist, and anti-fascist, all emphasizing compound radicality through exposure, but especially indigenous stories and unpaid labor at large, whores in particular, alongside Gothic ones, by wedding BIPOC struggles to white without ranking rape, monopolizing oppression, approaching other cultures, or otherwise reducing things merely to class, culture, or race, which cheapens struggle, i.e. interrogating Gothic's wisdom of the ancients, a cultural understanding of the imaginary past, alongside indigenous cultures' wisdom of the ancestors, i.e. the value in showing intersectional solidarity when combating fascism. 2026. The invitation is global, healing together while pushing forwards, in highly vampiric ways, the break capitalist realism's boomer-bust refrains on the aegis. Overlapping gender, culture, race, class, and war, while pushing for intersectional consciousness and solidarity, awareness, and teamwork under state predation mid-abjection, pertaining to the Gothic communism being holistic. Regarding intersectional consciousness, a neologism I coined, one meant to combat various forms of reductionism, i.e. class, culture, and race, i.e. by building on Marx's notion of class consciousness, combining class with culture and race consciousness, awareness, to raise emotional Gothic intelligence, while synthesizing praxis, abridged source, paratextual documents. When such a castle appears, it is time to be afraid. The colonial harvest is at hand, yet precisely because the state does not hold a monopoly over violence, terror, and morphological expression, a demon and/or castle needn't spell our end. It can represent our sole means of attack, reclaiming said Poetic's endless inventiveness to turn colonizer fears back into their hopelessly scared brains. Source: Praise Liberators, i.e. the appearance of a dark castle that feeds in secret, suddenly dropping its cloak, the liminal hauntology of war, danger disco, making the world something to change, even when it, the ruling class behind the curtain, try to stall things until the end of the world. But the future refused to change. Under capitalist realism, limping to the grave, we have all the power we need to effect change, but we must unify to do so. Whores, yes, but merging with other educators, artists, performers, activists, etc. Source Skeet, alt text, Vanderward Art, 1/31/2026. The thumbnail for the value in showing intersectional solidarity on combating fascism. From top left to bottom right, Mercedes the Muse, Vic Mensa, Lady Izdahar, Mexican indigenous dancers honoring Alex Preddy in Minneapolis, Alicia Axiom, Oranati Politics, Black Liberation, Media, a local indigenous protest in Minneapolis, Jesse Gender, Rhina Targaryen, and Jules Next Door. As part of a collectively naked or cryptonymically and abjectly semi-naked below struggle of cheeky bitches or NBs, also below. Artist Maddie Minx, above. then rarified through our own non-corporeal artwork, often still illustrating bodies below. Artist Persephone Vanderwaard, with redheads and hyperbophilic imagery tying just as well to witchcraft, sodomy, blood libel, and Orientalism in the modern era, all things to reclaim upon ourselves, meaning our bodies, labor, and gender sexuality tied to the land as object of power and fear we reverse, terror, counter-terror, and esotropically with, re overcoming paroxysmal inertia and our sweet revenge, 2023 and 2025. Survival is victory to start with, getting the ball rolling towards communism of a non-queerphobic, anti-racist, pro-sex work, and eco-socialist sort, thus away from state vampirism during Little Gothic BDSM, re on the Aegis. So we terrorist commie horrors circumscribe and close and digest our enemies accordingly, alive. As one we cannot survive capital with alone, indeed not everyone does, harm happening locally, source Martyrs 2025, are martyrs from top left to bottom right, next Benedict, Jonathan Joss, Aaron Bushnell, and Renee Good, and all around the world to impact a variety of peoples over time, often indigenous, female, non-white, but not always. Exhibit 1, source The Wolf is Loose, subject top left, Renee Good, top middle, Neil Morris, top right, Marianne Vecchio, and Jeffrey Miller, bottom left, Keith Porter, bottom middle, Silverio Viejas Gonzalez and his children, bottom left, Bay Ryan, different victims and targets of fascism and imperialism, which fascism brings home to empire. This extends not just to outright rape and murder, but also generational trauma, stolen generations. In other words, much of human history, especially modern human history, historically materially determines through state predation as ongoing. Invasion is a structure, Patrick Wolf famously said, source settler colonialism, and the elimination of the native, 2006, cited Toxic Schlock Syndrome, 2025. So is extinction as something to discuss or not, concerning all the usual cop victim scapegoats, capital the state demand, under capitalist and socialist realism. Or as I write, our general focus here is learning from nature about violence, terror, and sexual morphologies, i.e. as controlled by state monopolies, silencing proletarian ones. Censorship equals extinction, i.e. queer transformative elements that feel magical, xenophilic, and drug-like during acid communism, but also controlled, forbidden, and chattelized as a potent and hauntological sex educational means of escaping capitalist realism to become better stewards of nature than capitalism is, which only rapes nature. Source, Call of the Wild, 2025. So whether city-state or nation-state tied to church, corporation, monarchy, bureaucracy, or some such fixture of the ruling class, the bourgeoisie aided by the petite bourgeoisie, the basic predicament boils down to state vampirism, cryptonomy, and abjection. States' rights versus worker rights, induality, and perpetuity. It also includes overcoming bias and establishment norms, which what might seem punk can actually have a semi-cloaked, swarfy fortress element to them in crisis within the panopticon. Gothic is full of phonies, from Walpole, Radcliffe, and Lewis onwards. So who's the real vampire and the fake? Note, owing to some weird reactionary bullshit in the Goth YouTube community, from Angela Benedict above, I've expanded heavily on this section today. It includes huge block quotes, if only because I've done this to death before, and don't feel like repeating myself, save to copy and paste my own essays and book sections, blowing my horn, whistle. This polemic, however catty it appears, is meant to educate others on the harms present within online discourse and elsewhere. If you prick me, do I not bleed? Let's see what kind of blood you bleed, Benedict, when struck, so to speak. All of this is opinion and research. Nothing here is to encourage harassment of the person shown below, above, or their fans. The former a public figure I am criticizing through fair use and free speech under American law. How you react when critiqued without kid gloves on. From thou callest me dog through veiled language, in my opinion, before thou hadst to cause. But since I'm a dog, beware my fangs. Source, The Merchant of Venice, circa 1596. 2. What is a turf? A miserable pile of secrets, but enough talk. Have at you! Source, Clyde Mandolin's How Symphony of the Night's miserable pile of secrets scene works in Japanese. It would seem the theater kids are fighting again. Take something useful from it. And to Benedict, 'Tis but a scratch, girl. Think of it as a love tap to shock you to your senses. A system shock. Perse 5/4/2026. P.S. Expanded on this opening a bit, especially regarding gatekeeping, after talking with my partners about Angela Benedict. Exhibit 40J2B from Ruling the Slum are Crime Lords, Police Tokenism and Sellouts, 2024. In part, Top Dollar's hideout stands for a demonic version of Trump Tower, which itself is simply a more boastful version of capitalism in moderation, a vanity project advertising the owner. The center of a dilapidated city bled dry. Detroit's territories are divided up and policed, then fought over to coax money, drugs, and weapons, towards the nucleus, and through the giant structure's vampiric throat, up and up to Top Dollar. It's also a front, disguised as a club whose musicians sport the countercultural facade of a latter-day speakeasy, the prohibited satanic imagery and BDSM gear of a band playing with caged impunity on a stage ringed with security between them and the paying mob. And directly upstairs, we're showing the sprawling lifeblood of the city, converted into the usual merchandise and arranged along the same giant table-like food. At the head of the table is a phone and Faustian business deals, i.e. the city's central nervous system wired between its assigned underworld boss and his obvious if implied connections to City Hall and the police. The division between cops and robbers is a conservative myth glorified by the movies, nostalgic consumerism towards outlaw culture/music, i.e. as a school of disguise concealing the fact that all illustrate and serve capital until our titular vigilante, the movie's outlaw folk hero, killer clown, satanic musician, paralyzes the whole operation by cutting the snake to ribbons with Top Dollar's own supply. When the cops arrive, they threaten him in force. That's all she wrote, moving we shoot. Profit defends profit. Source: YouTube, cited Chapter 2, Sex Coercion. Sex coercion under zombie capitalism, including bad drugs and voluntary lobotomy. Gatekeeping can have an anti-predation quality, generally among decentralized communities, especially with the homeless, speakeasies, underground networks, etc., and generally as protection from cops, but in wider, more popular and mainstream territories, or even just commodified ones, which Goth is, so-called mole rock, and the hot topic effect Jeff Waters sang about years ago. It has been, similar to punk or anything else that capital assimilates, gatekeeping functions more like anti-immigration policy, as something xenophobic in a variety of ways that more often than not target various marginalities separately and together. The latter is regressive, and Goth subculture is not immune to tokenization, above. Meaning, in ways other Goths have commented on besides me, e.g., my candlelights, is Goth gatekeeping toxic or necessary, 2026. Prescription and gatekeeping historically become elitist in that case, a pernicious and sinister means of de facto police action harming the movement, and generally by keeping it exclusive during fascism and capital in crisis, e.g. akin to Brexit and tariffs in Britain, and Christo-fascism and all it entails in North America. Anyone who does that is a giant unmitigated cunt. Morticia Adams wore black and red, not a fash. So did the Nazis, and I see you, bitch. Nazis and liberals are posers on the tin or functional, e.g. Feruza Bulk below. RE, a crash course, Introduction to Vampires and Witches, footnote 15. Regarding the Hot Topic effect, hey man, I hear they're having a sale down at Hot Topic. Let's go. Annihilators the trend, 2010. What capital outlaws, it also commodifies, RE, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and anything comparable to rock stolen from black culture by whites, e.g. rap, funk, blues, jazz, etc. See also Chapter 2, Sex Coercion, above. For the colonizer pimping the witch, the abuser class commonly reverses roles in bed to fetishize what they're unironically doing elsewhere, dehumanizing the harvest while furthering abjection, sex and force along Cartesian models. RE Part 0, 1, 2, 3, and the finale of Synthesis Roadmap, or Nature is Food. For them, anything goes. For those they discipline and punish, everything is an offense. The same Puritan hypocrisy dating back to Hawthorne's Young Goodman Brown, 1835, and well before. See Atun-Shei's own excoriations of the pre-Revolutionary War Puritans, including their 2023 precursor to the Vampires of New Orleans, the Sudbury Devil. Regarding Morticia Addams not being fash, see John the Duncans, A Funhouse Mirror, The Addams Family, and the failure of Netflix's Wednesday, or my own response to the show and character, pigtail power and cross-dressing, sex repulsion, and Gothic queer narratives, 2023. Speaking of the Panopticon, a tower designed to sequester and surveil lepers, and which Foucault made famous in his 1976 Discipline and Punish, in-groups, meaning capital and the middle class, serving the ruling class to enact state predation, impersonate out-group prey, they shamelessly imitate in bad faith, enjoying a variety of double standards as they do. So when Angela Benedict released Goth has a brain rot problem above 2026, I, a sex worker and anti-fascist, immediately noted the reactionary element hidden mid-pastiche and mid-genocide. The internet has turned Goth into a caricature. E-girls cash in on exploiting tropes, gooners drool, and now those outside Goth think it's true. It's not, from her video description, which feels rich given her pasty white ass is also on the internet. I'm not saying you can't critique sex work or a toxic schlock syndrome, but this felt swerfy to me, ergo turfy while blowing the whistle in bad faith, i.e. in ways that seemingly defending a fortress of solitude from evil enslavers is actually its own form of Red Scare moral panic, whorephobia. Red flags began to wave before the shooting started. However, this led to something revealing about their fan base in the comments after I opened my mouth, as one does. Me, as a trans sex worker, academic, activist, and gothicist, I'm disinclined to lean into sex bad, i.e. blaming the whore. My book series, and work I do alongside other Gothic whores, is literally against what you're saying here, which feels a touch swerfy to be honest, but correct me if I'm wrong. And Goth as a caricature is a bit funny to me, given it's been that way for centuries, all the way back to Lewis and Radcliffe in the 1790s, and before. Suing to Desunator? A White Knight. This reads as parody. Translation. Look at the dumb whore. Me, it's not. I'll do a video about it today. However, and to reply, a lot of Goth subculture feels like means testing is very material-focused, read, middle class, i.e. Tim Burton syndrome, which is its own kind of gatekeeping. Singing to, I'm not going to watch your video, I'm going to do my makeup and listen to Death in June. Translation, I'm not listening. To summarize, Goth baddie dressed like a vampire and plugging their shit while handing down dogma, dominatrix style, says thing that sounds legitimate to a larger circus, cult, one they can regulate with plausible deniability. Again, in my opinion, tied to my academic work defending sex work. Owing to the material side of things, any ensuing de rigueur has been established seemingly ex nihilo, but in fact actually occurred over time, e.g. Desade's BDSM gear, tied to later usage, soars Sontag's fascinating fascism, happening alongside now openly gay metal god Rob Halford, adopting a judge's robes and aura for he and his bandmates' stage gimmicks amid legal troubles. Source, Metal Matt. Dream Deceivers documentary, the source behind James Vance vs. Judas Priest, 1992, 2021, timestamp 4229. Point in fact, they did the same BDSM from outer space gimmick that Kiss did, RE from Judas Priest Invincible Shield in Zionism, 2024. As time went on, Priest sold out. Their critical lyrics became deliberately dumb, starting with British Steel, 1980, into Painkiller, 1990, the latter being something to emulate with Invincible Shield as pastiche of something that, far from being a joke, has become canon to espouse whatever dogma the band wants to enrich themselves with. It's an empty ghost of a reinvention that remains holy, like the titular Painkiller, curiously summoned out of the imaginary past during a time of civilized collapse, thus medieval apocalypse and rapture amid the decaying cities surrounding wasteland and tombstone-esque skyscrapers, and laden with mythical symbols ejected from their historical context to fulfill a new goal, priests have become something to call for and preach a new wisdom to the masses. And yet, out of the ruins, they're ripping themselves off and have other musicians to boot, and have ripped off other musicians to boot, with their musical mascot clearly inspired by Meatloaf's Phantom Biker from Bat Out of Hell. (1978). This brings us to the famous and mysterious Priest insignia. It dates back to their second album, Sad Wings of Destiny, 1976, but which the band have deliberately injected into their logo since 2008's Angel of Retribution. Not much is known or said about it as far as I could find, the band staying quiet on it when remembering Sad Wings 35 years later with Malcolm Dome, but it remains highly ubiquitous and arcane, serving both as cryptic heraldry for the Painkiller's knightly armor, stamped on the shoulder like a military badge, while he defeats alien forces in times of state crisis, thus decay and collapse, all serve as part of a poetically medieval regression, one whose proposed damnation and salvation operate through the unironic worship of force. In short, it's the fascist obscurantism made to elevate the band, both in terms of wealth and status, as heavy metal gods who look after their own as a kind of flock to part from its wool, e.g. Halford explaining in 2020, "We love our fans. We would never put anything in our music with the intent of harming them." Source: Judas Priest's Rob Halford reflects on 30th anniversary a subliminal message lawsuit, except also having another revelation that hints at the parasocial and parasitic relationship between bands and those who support them. "I had to sing Better by You, Better Than Me in court, a cappella. I think that was when the judge thought, what am I doing here? No band goes out of its way to kill its fans." Source: Rock and Roll True Stories. Judas Priest, the lawsuit over Better by You, Better Than Me that shook the metal world, 2023. Priest, specifically Halford, also recognized the judge as a staged, imposing presence, the singer likened to himself when viewed by his own fans on stage. "When you're in court, you always see this guy in the back with a gown, and he's very imposing and very dramatic. And it's amusing. I think of the judge like the fans think of us when they see us on stage. What's he really like close up? Has he got feet and all that business?" Source: Dream Deceivers documentary. In the same documentary cited above, Halford also curiously describes himself as an intellectual who writes about dark lyrics that aren't American love songs, but the fact remains that Capitol accommodates him according to his relationship with fans loving him in ways that cater to their fragile white worldviews, i.e., as things to defend using heavy metal as comfort food, not activism. This reflects in Priest's metal pastoralism, which in modern times assists in capitalist realism by a bunch of posers who suck precisely because they're making hay while Palestinians are being killed on a military-industrial scale. So much for being an intellectual, as Edward Said would call himself, in Representations of an Intellectual, 1993. Though Priest ain't got the guts to challenge their own position despite fans around the world loving them, they've proven for decades they will exploit 70s-era BDSM fetish gear, the Nazi echo, and biker leather daddy culture. Source: Revolver. I think that speaks to the complicity Priest bear in things, and the utter fragility of capitalist realism as a transactional process. Better to keep mum regarding the quiet part and posture as a hero than kill the hero by speaking truth to power in consequential ways, all very ironic considering Priest's immortal line in Hero's End, 1978. "Why you have to die if you're a hero, when there's still so many things left to say unsaid." Source: Genius. The idea has become the institution, except for Frederick Jameson's postmodernism. This means blank parody, a statue with blind eyeballs, remediated through endless pastiche. Posing as liberators and rebels, Priest with invincible shield have become deaf, dumb, and blind. But as men behind the curtain, I think they're either well aware of it, or they don't care enough to challenge their own brand as part of a Zionist capitalist enterprise. This idea of heavy metal warriors certainly isn't unique to Britain, with American band Kiss's Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons both being Jewish. The Judas Priest symbol is really no different, effectively taking ancient non-Christian symbols like the menorah, or rather a weird convergent likeness of it, and imbuing them with a fresh sense of settler colonial purpose, during imperialism's ongoing evolutions inside capitalist realism, expanding the imperial potential of revivals of Caesar through an endless series of counterfeits. In turn, these forgeries drive profit through infinite military conquest as dressed up in symbols of recuperated oppression, a rock and roll army. Regarding Kiss and their Jewish origins, as John Stratton writes in Kiss, Jewishness, Hard Rock, and the Holocaust 2020, Kiss was a hard rock group, one of the most successful during the second half of the 1970s and early 80s. The group's two founding members, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, were both Jewish. Indeed, both were sons of Holocaust survivors. This article examines the impact of Simmons's and Stanley's Jewishness on Kiss as a rock group and its success. One of the most obvious impacts was the drive to succeed, which Simmons and Stanley shared. Simmons writes about wanting power, Stanley that he wanted respect. As children of survivors, they wanted safety. During much of the 1970s, the Holocaust was not yet publicly acknowledged. However, its trauma is evident in, for example, the stage characters that Simmons and Stanley adopted. Source. To this, capitalism and Judas Priest have recruited Jewishness to serve secular colonialism through a metal voice that has lost much of its irony, but none of its dogmatic potential. Cis women and gay guys sell out too. I used to be louder, so maybe stop judging the kids for being too much. They're fighting for their lives while we're worried about maintaining what we've built. I'm not saying burn it all down. I'm saying remember when you would have had. I'm saying remember when you would have, and ask yourself what you lost when you decided fitting in mattered more than fighting back. Because the people trying to erase us don't distinguish between the good guys and the bad ones. The good gays and the bad ones. They just wait for us to be too tired, too comfortable, or too respectable to fight. Don't make it that easy for them. Source, Facebook post, December 10th, 2025, cited Sharing the Blame, 2025. Same goes for women, cis or otherwise, and sex work, the formerly or never wild, segregating themselves, if only to a degree, from something they can criminalize, blame, and prey upon, cryptonomy and abjection. Image, Ibid. Gothic is sex, drugs, and rock and roll, policing it even when sobriety and prohibition creeps into the message. Priest gentrified and decayed their cop victim, false rebel complex, under capital like punk historically did. See skinheads in their history versus heavy metal and other outside groups, being historically white straight men playing the part in bad faith, e.g. Black Sabbath, with Ozzy being a hardcore Zionist. In Halford's case, eventually he and his sobered up, cleaning up the band's image by removing the radical elements present in their 70s work, while still keeping the comic book and lucrative facade of rebellion. In fact, they continue to make millions in light of ongoing genocide, queer but also Palestinian, alongside Kiss above. The same pick-me idea of a false rebellion from Parenti's Black Shirts and Reds, 1997, ties to feminism and tokenism as I cover it, i.e. regarding tokenism and fighting it. That is, behind one bigotry or act of exclusion, you will find others lurking within homeless, as shown within first and second wave feminism adopting goth aesthetics, i.e. to disguise themselves, defang the most rebellious potential through tokenized witch hunts, chartering, and partitioning the usual cells, i.e. policing the whore, and ladies first, or the grift of false rebellion, 2024 and 2025. A cop's a cop, ipso facto, reactionaries and moderates alike relying on audience ignorance to function, deliver calls to action against problem issues. The same goes for goth subculture past and present. Pot meet kettle, you're a princess pimp, and whore's clothes. A vampire sucking for the status quo, ergo the state. What is it, kitty? Yeah, you don't like hypocrites either? Yeah, me neither. Regarding calls to action, awareness becoming fascist, thus anti-woke, dressed up as woke, the colonizer aping the colonized. Cat. Sorry, my cat wanted me to beat them, so I had to do that real quick. I'm just kidding, I don't actually beat my cat, but she is annoying and does like to be spanked. For whatever fucking reason. Awareness becoming fascist, thus anti-woke, dressing up as woke. The colonizer aping the colonized on all registers. Source, thumbnail, Goth has a brain rot problem. Brain rot is a goth plague. Speaking of which, and returning to Benedict's hypocritically asinine video, especially its sex equals anti-intellectual degenerate premise above, let's quickly dissect it. Before we do, some more history, a smidge, i.e. while keeping the basic historical material fact, punk decays, dialectically materially in mind. As I've said, there's often a gatekeeping quality to Gothic, and has been since the 1970s, and has been since the 1790s, rather, at least. In fact, the first modern Gothic novel, after Shakespeare's oral stage plays, appeared in 1764 by Horace Walpole, which he passed off as a historical document only confess as his own in 1765. The movement gathered steam in the 1790s with Anne Radcliffe and Matthew Lewis, a straight woman and gay man, as competing novelists during the Gothic convention of terrorism. R.E. Crawford, 2013. Stop meowing, cat. Even here, there was an exclusionary element to Radcliffe, who distanced herself from Lewis, radicalism, and the French Revolution. See On the Supernatural and Poetry, 1826, a trend that would continue into future Gothic stories and replication, monopolized by white straight paid men and women for the next several centuries. There's a homonormative element in spots, but if you need proof of the cishet, feminist, transphobic stamp, look no further than J.K. Rowling. R.E. Dead on Arrival. Same goes for Angela Benedict, it seems, our resident detective essentially arguing for Gothic purity and cleanliness from stupid horrors with easy clickbait, sex equals dumb, above, i.e., keeping Gothic, goth or otherwise, safe for work under a Protestant ethic, aka Puritan ethic, one shaming the slut, thus devaluing sex work, and deeply criminalized moral panic value judgments. I beg to differ. Gothic aesthetics, vampires or otherwise, exist in duality and flow of power, equals function, equals Blood Bunny and the work they've done with me, above. That means we sex workers have to be smart to survive the censors and make our living under capital, Gothic circles included. If my voice sounds a little bit far away, it's because I'm trying to pet the cat and read at the same time, because she is desperate for pets and scratches. Aren't you, you stupid whore? Decolonizing vampires under duress, R.E. Blood Bunny censored by search algorithms, versus fake clowns, fascist and liberal, the latter fascist with more masks, recuperating Gothic in swerfy ways from tactical frivolity. The point here is morphology plays out in the flesh, by speaking tactically to larger inequalities which workers relate to differently through shared struggle. In the same boat, their personal alienation occurs through abjection as reversible. In turn, Gothic wish fulfillment cloaks commands, cryptonymically in the feudal language of power and place, a given fortress embodying time and place, space, as planet to conquer in state eyes, but which rebellious forces reverse the flow of power on the Aegis. In keeping with nature as fetish during Little Gothic BDSM, whores equal anything the state wants to pimp, thus feed on, and whose subsequent terror we can bounce froggily back at them. R.E. Not... Stop it, kitty. R.E. Not only can terror be employed as a weapon, but any weapon can become a weapon of terror. Terror is a weapon is terror. And no one agency monopolizes it, source Robert Asprey's War in the Shadows. That is, fake jesters who dressed up as dead whores, a tradition of graveyard sex that goes back to ancient Rome and to neo-Gothic live burial. See B.B. Wagner's The Graveyard Prostitutes of Rome and Beyond, 2022, cited in A Cruel Angel's Thesis, 2024, curiously have the same brain-dead, reactionary to moderate takes an open Philistine might, R.E. from Dead on Arrival. To it, there are stiff differences between praise and perdition, i.e. someone who responds by asking, "Are you a wizard?" and someone, e.g. Bada Panada, who goes, "Witchcraft." The incel loves hates the baddie, i.e. as someone to chase in puritanical, pimp the whore ways. Older socialists or those nostalgic for Marx, Stalin, and Mao's sexism and homophobia, being conservatives in red paint. R.E. on sex work versus Marxist Leninism from Raising Awareness. I digress. Objection is objection, mid-cryptonomy, affording weird paradoxes, i.e. where the nun apes the monk to punch Pazuzu here at home, above. A given defender of the faith, exercising the homewrecker whore, mid-objection is loaded with endless crusader bigotries and detective demons, boundaries for me, not for the hypocrisies, or a Nancy Drew syndrome with an elitist Halloween stamp. No actual whores allowed, shouted under false flags, playing vampire cops and victims. Oh, won't someone please think of those poor meddling kids, of the women and children, of our right as Americans to clean house of degenerates mid-vaudeville, make Halloween great again, clean up Goth, and the streets of any evil fakes doing the devil and the pimp's work. A cop's a cop. Bryant's traitorous function ironically betrayed through the arguments they make and costumes shared by perceived impostors, we whores. So does Benedict radiate Anita Bryant energies in bad faith, i.e. while playing the rebel, punching specters not just of Marx, but of Medusa accordingly. She's betraying the larger cause we both belong to, as cops do, including turfs and swerfs, infiltrating different discos, whose brain and moral core is rotten again. Darvo and obscurantism hard at work, the Protestant ethic. So does Gothic endlessly sell out, i.e. from Radcliffe to Rowling to Benedict, all living in Gothic times, alongside those they reactively scratch and kettle. Sometimes whores scratch back. Regarding Pazuzu, the lawn jockey and minstrel show blackface wearing bone-white corpse paint echoes Fanon's black-skin white masks, 1952, i.e. while being used by white performers acting in bad faith, colonizing Gothic above. Source The Imperial Boomerang Part 2, Cryptomimesis or Pieces of the Dead, 2024. It's the white Indian on Gothic stages, fearful of so-called black planets they warn of through various scapegoats. A skull equals theft of a Radcliffean sort, its ensuing cryptonomy furthering abjection, ergo state vampirism in defense of nuclear home. The Black Veil, Radcliffe's chief commercial success, first and foremost, and one incumbent on terrorism serving the status quo, even if they can't monopolize it. To it, Goth subculture has similar gatekeeper elements that punk, post-punk, aka disco in disguise did, which cannibalized funk, as Mumia Al-Jamal explains to FT Signifier, but I digress. White power structures, even when posturing as black, racial or otherwise, commodify expression in gothically immature ways, see footnote number 5. In turn, swerfs tokenize to fight over tips, sloganizing tip your waitress or Gothic barista instead of your sex worker, a pimp's a pimp. Themselves being tied to different cultural movements in their areas that allowed certain people in and left others out. Take a wild guess at whom, e.g. post-punk in Thatcher's England, neoliberalism, Peter Hook and Company's The Hacienda literally being a music club challenging that status quo, but now one without its own problems. See The Hacienda, How Not to Run a Club, as Marilyn Roxy, a post-punk nerd and Mancunian transplant, did during my stay in Manchester, England for my master's. Gaslight gatekeep girl boss is a fundamental problem of Gothic, and it has been from the start. R.A. Radcliffe's refrain, and all my work on her, i.e. in academia and children's fiction. As Chloe Germain Buckley points out, a 21st century children's Gothic, from the wanderer to nomadic subject, 2017, and Catherine Spooner on the larger Gothic mode, including Goth and post-millennial Gothic, comedy, romance, and the rise of happy Gothic, 2019. There's a monster mash party or club or exclusivity to such things, and academic or not, they get bounced like anyone guarding the doors. And such things have routinely founded on fakery that further or reverse abjection, big cryptonomy, thus state predation, RE from raising awareness, footnote 1. Source, Malachi Louis, The Hacienda, How Not to Run a Club, Peter Hook's page-turning quarantine read. Regarding The Hacienda, I actually saw the former club when I was in Manchester at MMU, meaning from September 17, 2017 to June 2018, in its own gatekeeping mechanism. RE, Persephone Vanderwart's Quora answer to how easy is it to get into Manchester Metropolitan University, cited from Masters to PhD, 2025. In keeping with neoliberalism and gentrification, New Order's Alamo had long since turned into condos for expat citygoers, a topic discussed by local academics, including a seminar I attended while living in the Boomtown College district of a larger industrial throwback. Said industriality echoed in the design of the Hacienda itself, which was basically Mos Eisley's bar in A New Hope. but I digress. Hogel's counterfeit ties to Western models of power that tyrants around the world hauntologically imitate, meaning anachronistically but haunted, as I and others argue, by state power, re specters of Caesar. Per Radcliffe, rape and police abuse is a potent aphrodisiac, re Radcliffe's refrain. Hence, where shadows are both invented and power is found by demasking such fiends, i.e., what canonical Gothic uses to hint at police abuse, only to tokenize us through the same gaslight. Source, Toxic Love and Criminal Sexuality and True Crime, 2025. In turn, and per Radcliffe's refrain, such things are scapegoats to banish, but also ghosts of the counterfeit to quickly summon and banish from behind black veils pulled aside, made inheritance. And the Gothic, from the later 18th century on, as David Punter has shown, the middle class often does what we have just seen Leroux do in Le Fantôme. It displaces the hidden violence of present social structures, conjures them up again as past, and falls promptly under their spell, with feelings of both fear and attraction towards the phantasms of what is displaced. Punter. The Gothic is, well before Leroux adopts it, enables a growing bourgeois hegemony to be both haunted by and distanced from the hidden barbarities that have helped make it possible. Also Punter. And hence the repressed uncertainties it feels about its own legitimacy, as in Abraham's Fantôme, by projecting such anomalies into the horrors of apparently old and alien specters, buildings, and crypts. Source, The Ghost of the Counterfeit, Leroux's Fantôme, and the Cultural Work of the Gothic, 2002. In other words, I per Hogel unto myself, power in the West is largely faked and has been out from the start. Hogel argues that modern Gothic is grounded in fakery. In turn, Hogel's observation of the history of the Castle of Otranto forms the basis for understanding the concept of counterfeit as a result of the objection process, R.E. West, 2023. But Gothic, especially from the middle-class side, remains haunted by its own betrayals into rising feelings of terrorism tied to modern Gothic, R.E. Crawford. Ergo police violence, under capitalist realism monopolizing monsters for these aims, profit through abjection, R.E. Me, 2024. A wild bastard or conqueror of some kind appears from somewhere else. A fearful past below, and must be subsequently dealt with, generally through heroic medieval levels of violence, extreme prejudice. Artist Derek Zabaraki. Per abjection, there must always be a horror to scapegoat, including crooked cops whitewashing dark castles when destroyed, from Walpole onwards, a bastard to expose and expunge, rectifying a wronged power, if it presumably imitated and usurped. Its state apologia, whose Darvo arguments author dark scapegoats and death warrants to transfer power from one ruler to the next, often through barbaric levels of poetic force inside the same chronotopes, Arif and Bakhtin, onto myriad castle-themed power fantasies, e.g. Howard's Conan the Barbarian, looting many a fortress from unrightful heirs such as evil wizards, dragon lords, black knights, archaic mothers, etc., as dark to justify their righteous slaughter. Below, artist Frank Frazetta. The same fakery and trickery can be used by state powers or by workers on stage and off, meaning in dialectic and material exchanges that hug the alien as a dualistic force, an inkblot. To that, and to reiterate, sex workers, a facet of unpaid labor alongside care reproductive labor, can challenge the nuclear model versus defending it, whether on purpose or not, Benedict, RA from Raising Awareness, footnote number 2. Any movement, be it openly capitalist or socialist communist in the name, and arguably capitalist in function, to whatever degree that is, historically exploits women's work, RME vis-a-vis John Duncan, timestamp 1:39:55, i.e. by taking women's work for granted, therefore advantage of all over the place. In the discussion of cheap work in the previous chapter, we connected rural and urban economics in the link between global farms and global factories. The availability of proletarian labor was possible only because of the transformation of care work into unpaid work, available as one of nature's free gifts, which, as we have seen, are neither free nor gifted. One radical response to the fundamental devaluation of care work involves a jujitsu pricing move and the demand that housework be paid. As the 1970s Wages for Housework campaign argued, slavery to an assembly line is not a liberation from slavery to a kitchen sink. To deny this is also to deny the slavery of the assembly line itself, proving again that if you don't know how women are exploited, you can never really know how men are. The irony here, of course, is that there's a long history of women who were paid little, if at all, for their domestic labor, those working under slavery. The United States is not alone in this pattern, with carers from different classes, castes, and indeed nations suffering widespread exploitation in other countries too. And even if payment were a route to recognition, there's much further to go to reach dignity. As Angela Davis put it, psychological liberation can hardly be achieved simply by paying the housewife a wage. Yet, the insight of wages for housework shouldn't be forgotten. To ask for capitalism to pay for care is to call for an end to capitalism. Emphasis me. Source, I forgot to include that here. A History of the World in 7 Cheap Things by Patel and more. This tendency is so pervasive that John the Duncan, in his own video, doesn't even mention sex workers at all, leading me to have to call him out for it. Timestamp 2/1802. Alright, when the man comes around, show him your ages. To free the land is also to free labor and sex, therefore all of nature is much as feminine, female or not, white or not. A breaking of all the monopolies used to pimp nature as usual, e.g. of violence, terror, and monsters rooted in the ancient cradle of abuse, showing capital where it eventually will die during the whore's revenge. Our sweet revenge. Model and photographer Kuwu and Persephone Vanderwaard cited Meeting Rebels 2004. Or as Carl Sagan puts it, to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. To that, the inventors of society and nature are in for a rude awakening. R.E. Descartes, Bacon, and others see Patel and Moore's section on the Cartesian Revolution, but also state shift, i.e. when Mother Nature, climate change, takes the planet back for good, the capital is being laid ungraciously to rest when Medusa sits on it. To prevent that, we must learn to see women, or those treated like women, as capable not just of intelligence, but of revolutionary action, i.e. building a better world through Gothic communism, the domain of Amazons and Gorgons, i.e. through a holistic and shared intersectional consciousness of class, culture, and race. i.e. Kuwu, above, was a revolutionary actor, a trans man to be specific, who thought and read, but also used their sexual labor to further radicalize me. Development is a lifelong battle, continuing long after the present generation has kicked the bucket. Intent doesn't matter, socio-material outcomes do. So when Benedict writes, Goth has a brain rot problem, she's already invoking the insider-outsider argument that furthers objection through a Goth aesthetic as under attack by whores. The false flag alarm bell to ring and profit off in equal measure. If you scratch a swerve, a turf bleeds fascist blood. It's just more pearls to clutch, throwing others, namely sex workers, under the bus, meaning in the Faustian bargain she's making whether she realizes or not, a one that blinds her and others. To those they need to solidarize and empathize with, not ignore. Above, cited, who's Frederick Brennan. Silence is death, my friend. A simulation poor stewardship defending the nuclear model / state predation, male or not, a cop's a cop, a pimp's a pimp. Right, source, Brooklyn Museum, Silence Equals Death, 1987, artists, Avram Finkelstein, Brian Howard, Oliver Johnston, Charles Kreloff, Chris Leone, and Jorge Sakaris, cited The Wolf is Loose. Sorskeed Vanderwaard, Art 5/1/2026. R.E. John the Duncan's The Femisphere, which I respond to above. As far as all of that goes, pinkwash is pinkwash, and austerity politics root in fascism. Same goes for blood and red pills being recuperated and reclaimed back and forth. Vampires are Goth mascots, and blood merchants for the middle class in canonical forms. Policing Gothic and neighboring territories like the Holy Fucking Bible, Benedict et al. Demonstrate the idea has become the institution. Being a line uttered in 1994 by Michael Wincott, it still feels disturbingly relevant today during feminist portrayals, by those, white, straight, middle class and or paid, etc., versus those who aren't. See John the Duncan's The Femisphere, which I respond to above, regarding turfs and swerves. Token vamps speak poetically to a consolidation of power, but also a dependency of feeding under toxically undead predator-prey conditions, that Gothic communism subverts by design, doing so in asymmetrical ways. The toxicity of our city, where eating seeds or drinking blood in so many ways is a pastime activity, challenging cloaked reactionaries like Angela Benedict, who walks in the footsteps of people like Angela Carter, and worse, Anita Bryant, J.K. Rowling, and Gina Raymond, author of the incredibly transphobic screed, The Transsexual Empire, 1979, etc. Whorephobia is a bigotry, and bigotry, slurs or otherwise, isn't activism. It's a spectrum of exclusion, one that through spurious invasion and replacement fears deliberately targets those who do sex work to survive, both in the immediate material sense and in the social sense when racism, anti-trans rhetoric, and similar reactionary/moderate staging points continue to rise, all sides of the same die. It behooves communists, then, to interview those eating seeds, and I've eaten my fair share, and been eaten by opportunistic predators, whores closer to exploitation than most. I ate Gothic as sex, drugs, and rock and roll as such, but also comics, video games, cosplay, goth or otherwise, and so many other things, the socio-material dialectic of the alien, enabling guerrilla action in multimedia ways, are a revolutionary cryptonomy and public nudism, or things comparable to nudism. All comment on corporate greed and capital decaying into fascism, theft and lies, false flags, but also open to veiled, endorsed if not openly sanctioned violence. Proud girls stand down and stand by. Where one is, the other is never far behind, scorching black the very earth itself. R.E. White Indians, Black Planets. Onto the breach. So do Gothic feminists, of older waves passing off as new again, take a black pill that celebrates the aesthetics while punching down at whores and other performers treated like whores, e.g. drag shows, in bad faith. Don't do that, fuckers. We want more life. Enough about Benedict and her creed. Now that you have the gist and know what's at stake, let's examine things a bit more deeply using those devices. First, an essay on vampire Superman, canon, and camping it, and similar things. Then, through rememory, as the passing down of what we assemble afterwards, or a camp, as taught to me by my mother's wild side. These are the footnotes. Artist, not equal source, Robert Lambert Jones III's Mythological Beasts and Spirits, Naiad, 2016, cited Death by Snoo Snoo. The footnotes for the portion of this document that we read are 1 through 11. Footnote 1. Amazons are, and similar monstrous feminine beings above, though here I inspect K-Fab and strongmen of a fascist otherworldly sort. Its ancient retrofuture pastiche concerning the superhero archetype as emblematic of state predation, Cartesian and similar binaries, and Western liberal values, essentially capital state vampirism in small, see on tyrants and their charm. So while some people reject the idea that Superman is fascist, e.g. Nerd thinks Superman is a Nazi, 2026, I've known others who say how Superman very much isn't punk. He's the status quo, as vampirically policing the world through immigrant-washing fantasies of assimilation under Pax Americana, the usual superhero, supervillain, cops, and robbers problem, mid-dialectic of the alien, as concerning the uncanny embrace of such things. As Vivian Strange argues while still enjoying the latest Superman film, enjoyment and criticism not mutually exclusive, are a cishet feminist and Idiot Sarkeesian's famous adage lambasted by Gamergate chuds, similar to MGTOW weirdos, acting apolitical in bad faith, demonizing the Wachowskis, two trans women. Zombies take many forms, some ordinary, and others not, but all concerning sex and force to varying degrees of semi-naked undeath, with fear of the man-made Superman dating back to Shelley's novel, the precocious teenager inspired by Milton to draft the first sci-fi story out of Gothic pastiche, rude materials, the ancient power of the gods, their fire falling from the sky, as if delivered ominously from on high. The morpheme super synonymous with Franken in compound nouns, Shelley's modern Prometheus denoting a self-destructive presence of power and nationalism, but also mad science and human parasitic interference over nature, e.g. superfoods and Frankenfish, but also superheroes and Frankenstein's monster alluding to super soldiers grown in laboratories. Deeply unethical zones, these places and their unscrupulous workers, owners Faustian bargains, injecting mysterious and toxic chemicals into patchwork corpses, test tube babies, the very land itself, the basic phenomenon, and its clone-like replication and consumption in and out of media, highly visible through different abject forms of popular stories recuperated into controlled opposition, then abused for efficient profit, i.e. superhero comfort food, that Gothic routinely draws up, doing so whenever reifying power is something to sublimate, then critique, of men and monsters, whose usual plans of mice and men do far worse when modern science and capital of the state butt in, wreaking havoc through highly militarized and infidel refrains above. Assimilation is poor stewardship, but so was the Enlightenment surviving into the present. Shelley's novel wasn't a guess, but a highly accurate dissection of what capital was already centuries underway by 1818, the year Marx was born, and back when electricity was previously called galvanism. Footnote 2. All of this. Footnote 2. But also undergraduate work, graduate work, and symposiums in the mid-2010s, followed by my interview series on Alien Ore 2019, and love for horror media tied to YouTube and my horror blog. All of this the precursor to what became my monster volume and its 3 modules, poetry, the undead, and demons, lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. Footnote number 3. A 90s neurodivergent theater kid, budding sexologist, an awkward loner with few actual non-imaginary friends, and one who loved Alien, Castlevania, and Metroid. Fun joke I heard once during a Super Castlevania 4 speedrun. Why did Dracula not keep a mirror at his castle? He couldn't see himself using it. Cited, sharing the blame. Footnote number 4. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but also pulp media at large, are Gothic equals trash. Trojan horses, e.g. Chumbawambas, tub thumpers, and various evocations of it being anti-fascism in disguise, and leading by design to more obvious out-and-out cases, the day the Nazi died, 1998. Code is code, cryptonomy and camp, something to work objection out with in duality, a concept we'll unpack more deeper in. Footnote number 5, Gothic maturity being, as I coin it, the ability to say healthy things through taboo language during Little Gothic BDSM, while pushing for intersectional solidarity and consciousness, developing Gothic communism, thus universal liberation, the various creative successes that collectively overcome praxial inertia, division, dormancy, and betrayal. To tell women to cover up and smile more doesn't work then, because segregation is no defense, silence equals death, and assimilation is poor stewardship. To prohibit Gothic subversive potential, camp denies workers historically awesome tools, which the state will pimp out anyways through canon. Camp equals rape play to reverse objection, and we camp canon because we must, from Colin Broadmoor to me, 2021 and 2023. This happens by enjoying taboo things, specifically by playing with them in subversive ways that liberate sex work, therefore all work, enjoy harm without endorsing its unironic forms, subversive play, a necessary form of critique during Little Gothic BDSM, regarding things normally played out without thought, me vis-a-vis Anita Sarkeesian's famous adage, source, sharing the blame, 2025. All's fair in loving war, canon versus camp, provided we unruly whores, subversive Amazons cryptonymically reverse abjection and duality, versus subjugated Amazons and other symbolic tokens armed subservience, i.e., an anisotropic apotropaic language that speaks to our past harm and ability to overcome it under present circumstances haunted by past failures, e.g. Marx and his followers were gothically immature, so we must go beyond what they felt comfortable doing, must transgress against state dogma, including socialist dogma and its realism, to thwart state vampirism on all registers. Making Marx gay. Source, Pluto Press Ibid. Towards a Gay Communism, Elements of a Homosexual Critique, Mario Millet. Footnote number 6, consent being non-existent in nature regarding ravishing fantasies, which generally under Freudian Cartesian models codes as female and or queerly monstrous feminine, war vaginas, 2021. Such things are canonically done to death, but iconoclastically oldies but goldies, i.e., if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You can't beat the walking vasovagal, that white and black, red and funerary of classic sadomasochism, of which Little Gothic BDSM emulates as much as any aesthetic under the sun. Camping psychosexually, the Catholic martyr fused with fascist torture dungeon and communist provocateur under capitalist realism, gluttons for punishment fucking with master-slave in various top-to-bottom ways. Infinite power, infinite forms, cryptonomy, and objection may take to offer palliative numinous avocations. Footnote 7. Moments are magical, and while they don't last in the moment or after, we can preserve them and their value as best we can. To appreciate, not appropriate, different cultures alongside a lack of transcendental signifieds, all to communicate as something to flow down towards workers, e.g. fire as a source of Christian dogma under a Protestant ethic, chiefly fire and brimstone, that under Polynesian and Pacific Islander cultures becomes the volcano as fire echoed in Prometheus and Buddhist culture, volcano coochie birthing islands, and reducing worlds to ash, where spraying the earth's fiery blood outwards, force of nature, from the Maui portion of a response from the Birdman and my words to him from Dead on Arrival, source, fandom. During our talk, Bay explained to me how Maui was a demigod, source, EBSCO, with one foot in both worlds, a trickster shapeshifter similar to Loki or Satan, who stole fire from the gods, specifically Mahika, and To Te Ahi a Mahika, or the stealing of the fire narrative, see Encyclopedia Mythica, similar to Prometheus from Greek myth, but also in my case, Persephone betrothed to Hades, and trying to conquer death and join the rift between humanity and the gods, symbols of alienation, immortality, and nature is numinous. Maui pays the ultimate price, giving him hubristic, tragic, but also trans characteristics. See J. G. Harker's Loki, Gender, and Sexuality in Norse Society, 2023. Finally, Maui decides to overcome his ancestress, Hine Nui Te Po, goddess of thunder and the underworld. Full of confidence and Faustian curiosity, a somewhat greedy thirst for knowledge centered around deception, Maui gathers a flock of island birds as companions. Together they come to the place where Hine Nui Te Po is sleeping. Maui plans to enter Hine, crawl through her body, and pass out through her mouth. This will kill her and ensure Maui's immortality after seemingly disemboweling and raping her, the earth. However, Maui's plan will succeed only if none of the birds laugh at him in the process, shown below. Unfortunately for Maui, one of the birds cannot help but laugh once Maui is inside Hine Nui Te Po. In consequence, the old woman awakes as she opens her eyes, starts up, and kills Maui. Maui's surprise death means that all humans have become mortal. Humans will bear children, but all will have to die eventually. Source EBSCO, i.e. original sin. In this case, it's quite similar not just to the Promethean theft of the god's fire and Eve from the Bible and the apple, but also the Medusa story, somewhat, though I think Hine crushes Maui's head between her thighs versus a petrifying gaze. I.e. nature is monstrous feminine and classically female, or having female elements tied to life and death, a source of terror guarding something sacred, alien and mighty, dark, intense, etc. Gorkins aside, such stories teach us mortals about nature as abject, and ways we can reclaim through the exchange of forbidden knowledge, i.e. the Promethean quest in Faustian bargain, two Gothic staples, see Forbidden Sight, Faust, and the Promethean quest, or knowledge and power exchange, 2025. In short, there's room to play, thus work with language as a far fuzzier thing to embody and empower ourselves than canonical forces care to admit, allow, say for themselves, of course. Footnote 8. Hailing Hellions, a series catalogued in my latest live volume, Volume 4, aka the Praxis Volume, or Pussy and the Chain Wax, 2026. Volume 9, Rememory, from Toni Morrison, and sadly forcing people to face the totality of a cultural past and its theft, one including tokenism, i.e. people with privilege betray out of convenience, and those with oppression out of desperation, i.e. Rememory of the Roots of Charma, 2024. Ibid, an image of Magua, from Last of the Mohicans. This plays out in ways that appropriate indigenous cultures, not just cunning recognition, but of assimilation by the conqueror, using the skins of dead indigenous peoples as sock puppets, or from footnote 16a of Onto the Breach, regarding an idea I call white Indians black planets. Where a speaker in the video recommends The Transit of Empire, Indigenous Critiques of Colonialism by Jody Bird. Bird's book discusses indigenous peoples and zombies, in which I respond vis-a-vis the Resident Evil 1996 video game series, citing Bird alongside John the Duncan's aforementioned cunning recognition video, and Noah Cadwell-Gervais's excellent A Thorough Look at Resident Evil. Timestamp 2/55/2026. Cunning recognition the game. Shiva equals sexy token tour guide to tame a savage continent. Zombies are bare life shooting galleries to embody and further secular colonialism to give-receive violence against nature. OG post I responded to, bring back Shiva like a zombie. Zombie equals resurrection and living death, i.e. the voice's oppression, but which can become empty pastiche of the original, a sock puppet, e.g. revelations from the Bible written by oppressed Christians under pagan Roman rule that now kind of equals state vampirism, source Kate Vanderward Art, March 31st, 2026. Again, skull equals theft, specifically the presence of abject generational trauma and concealment under criminogenic conditions, a state and its predation treating nature and those of it as the alien fetish, undead, demonic, and/or werewolves through dualistic modules of imbricating persecution language, e.g. blood libel, sodomy, and witchcraft, but also Orientalism, re. idle hands, and Exhibit 0, artist middle, Maginot 02, cited In Search of the Secret Spell, screen caps left and right, The Red Nation, and led Amaya 21. Escapism and rebellion aren't mutually exclusive. Furthermore, resistance and submission, while categorically separate, share the same stage while fetishizing understate dialogues /capital. Either workers reclaim mid-objection. They do so in Gothic dialogues on nature as criminal, whose critiques allow for cultural appropriation and appreciation. Terms like white Indian and black planet taken back from white savior vaudeville and are explored in exports to America, e.g. the Red Nations. RPH versus Avatar Fire and Ash, or a footnote 16a, and Leo Amaya 21's preview number 4, 18 versus Vegeta 2026. The irony isn't always there, must be added by the critics skeptical of representation, i.e. as a state tactic of cunning recognition, e.g. the cunning recognition of Palestine, meant to stymie resistance, me vis-a-vis Glenn Coulthard's red skin, white masks, 2014. Amazons are numinous, yes, but also deeply trashy actors sitting between worlds, the wisdom of the ancients, or cultural understanding of the imaginary past, and Gothic, but also indigenous culture's wisdom of the ancestors. It's my indigenous partner, Bay Ryan, helps me catalog and explore in the value in showing intersectional solidarity on combating fascism. Swerfs are TERFs, and TERFs are fascist, but react through grievance on kernels of truth used for state revenge. To that, nudities and bodies aren't automatically sinful, but exist in ways that exist that way canonically in Western eyes, i.e. that to reverse objection must view things through a radically empathetic lens, from those with more different oppression, a pedagogy of the oppressed, hugging the alien in ways which, like a curse, carry across space and time in written oral forms, re. healing from rape. Alienation ends when fetishization, the making of something into an object of power, serves worker needs tantamount to universal liberation, the poetic merger of sex and force that Amazons represent, and which indigenous cultures envision through their own stories revived by themselves and others across or shared purposes. Closing the gap requires care, courting good actors while avoiding bad ones, e.g. weird Marxist-Leninists waxing nostalgic, meaning for a time before trans people entered public discourse, whereupon MLs spout platitudes like socialism for all before blocking trans critics of Stalin's queerphobia, or socialism for all and deculturation do. Below, Sourcegate, Persephone Vanderwart 319, 2026. Click here for a follow-up where Socialism for All's fans rise weirdly to his defense and bad blind faith. Ibid 419, 2026. Was watching Red Pen's Groovy, a critique of Western Marxism, when someone decided to defend Socialism for All. Red Pen's video, my comments. I'm detecting a bit of bias here. Date, April 19th, 2026. I can't DM me either because he doesn't follow me. It's honestly super weird. You've jumped to the conclusion that he blocked you and isn't an ally. That's wild. What did Socialism for All do that was anti-woman or anti-BIPOC? Not a damn thing. These are all things that I actually read in The Price of Rice in China, so I'm not going to read all of those here, but feel free to have a look yourselves if you want. As I write, also in Unto the Breach, language as a tool, one is optional expanding of the mind, empathy, awareness, and teamwork, happens through Gothic stories' subversive potential source. This concerns us, punching up against open capitalists, but also state apologists on the Marxist-Leninist side of the die. Footnote number 10. Nudity equals scapegoat, but also anti-predation disruptor cryptonymically listing their demands. Introducing revolutionary cryptonomy and transgressive nudism 2024 and 2025. An emir-like terror device, we embody cryptonomy and objection, sits alongside various material factors made social, terrorism, and Gothic. This extends to the preoccupation with evil, fear, and violence as the defining characteristic of later Gothic literature, meaning of the late 1700s, source, the invention of Gothic terrorism, into current geopolitical confrontations. I echoed cryptomimetically through sex work, with whores being the arbiters of violence and terror through sex and force, terror, counter-terror reversals, and paradoxical, anisotropic, apotropaic reclamation in theatrical forms. Objection equals flow, and flow equals function, not aesthetic. To it, bombing never convinces the colonized to leave their own land, but always pushes the colonizer out through asymmetrical warfare. Instead of repurposing dropped ordnance in Vietnam or improvising IEDs in Iraq, modern tech has become so cheap as to make drones accessible to freedom fighters worldwide, e.g. in Ukraine, and as publicly available 3D printable drones, but also in Iran and elsewhere, a de facto tactical unity sharing the love. Giant machinery through colonial projects are slowly and then suddenly being swarmed by small, angry bees. Any attempt to swat them away, tiring out the invader, alongside simply taking damage. The two compound the entirety of this blowback coming home to roost abroad after decades of declassified warning signs, i.e., in man-made frontiers, America and Israel can no longer afford to cheaply police. Now they're meat grinders. Alongside this, climate change and manufactured crisis have made people desperate enough to try. It's working to favor the colonized. This death knell, for the Americans and Israelis, sits alongside the Russians, meaning when the oppressed suddenly become able and motivated to fight fire with fire. And there's fuck all the ruling class can do about it, especially when everyone is recording every single attack and flooding social media with it. More blowback. There's simply no way to stop it, and nowhere to hide. So much of their power is false. The inequalities of American imperialism starting to evaporate. Terror is the kissing cousin of force, wrote Esprit in 1975, and now the shoe's on the other foot. The old world is dying, and the new one struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters. Source YouTube community post, Persephone Vanderward, 4/30/2026. In response to History and Legends flashpoints, FPV drones are destroying the Israeli military, 2026. To that, old empire and states absorb into new ones. The proverbial rats flee a sinking ship, testified through an American brain drain beating it overseas. And likewise, the dialing back of domestic civil liberties concessions by the state tells all, including abortion rights or minority voting rights, e.g. Roe v. Wade in 2022, and the Civil Rights Voting Act today, by the usual American checks and balances, the tools of pacification at home, slowly, and then suddenly playing judge, jury, and executioner to serve the ruling class more nakedly. Anything they cannibalize, they will. The cushions of state benefactors in the imperial core, namely the middle class, systematically stripped, peeled like fruit of their rights, for the same old gluttons to gorge themselves on one last time, with reactionaries and moderates being two sides of the same predatory and mendacious coin. It springs up as classic rug pull during the imperial boomerang. I digress. When being stripped, talk to a stranger to gain fresh perspective. So while the decimator has become the decimated at home and abroad, the whore's revenge, and her terrifying powers, unfolds alongside all scapegoats and sacrificial lambs, coming back to eat the sacrificer, vampire-style, xenomorph or otherwise. Not so silent anymore, eh? Did he who make the lamb make thee? See or hear us roar. Artist Caravaggio. Or as Creed wrote once upon a time, when Perseus slew the Medusa, he did not, as commonly thought, put an end to her reign or destroy her terrifying powers. Afterwards, Athena embossed her mirror shield with the Medusa's head, the writhing snakes with their fanged, gaping mouths, and the Medusa's own enormous teeth and lolling tongue were on full view. The OG, Ahego. Athena's aim was simply to strike terror into the hearts of men, as well as reminding them of their symbolic debt to the imaginary castrating mother, and no doubt she knew what she was doing. After all, Athena was the great mother goddess of the ancient world, and according to ancient legend, the daughter of Metis, the goddess of wisdom, also known as the Medusa. Source Barbara Creed's The Monstrous Feminine, 1993. So too we whores become the Gorgon upon ourselves. Hurry, it began with a whisper, now scream, doing so like your lives depend on it. They do. Mock and defy whatever you must to survive by reviving and preserving the fearsome past. Footnote 11. Were things confused with venereal disease? Regarding vampires and what they encapsulate, including venereal disease, e.g. rabies, aka hydrophobia or lycanthropy, furries, that like the phases of the moon or menstruation, treat nature as not simply alien or criminal, but feral and hungry like the wolf. it becomes a freak show, a paradoxical source of patriarchal fascination and fear to chase by monomyth weirdos, are the numinous, but one iconoclasts can render palliative when camping canonical norms. To it, Medusa, symbolic of unpaid labor, sex or otherwise, as the oldest labor struggle, if not monster, has gravity as something capital hypes up to get state workers to attack this pimp, which all on its own empowers the hellion with counter-terrorist potential to turn the tables while seemingly on the hip. Like any Avenger worth their salt, she's strong as hell, but able to control a sticky situation while on her back, a Freudian spectre, the archaic mother, as much as any Marxist one Shelley touched on. Regarding furries, another way to demonize or valorize nature tied to indigenous, queer, and children's media, as iconoclastically commenting on our world being part of nature, not separate from it, re. Call of the Wild. Footnote 11a. Much of interview was written based on feedback, i.e. from friends listening to me read, or enemies pushing back during de facto peer review. Artist Angelica Alzona cited Origins of Faust, Our Brief History of Demons and Their Torturous Summoning Rituals and Effects from Dark Shadows, 2025. 11a. Regarding feedback from my partners, specifically here my partner Victoria Sakes, on vampires. Theory. Vampire is what they called autistic people because they didn't understand people who have/had it. Prefers to only go out at night, more active when the sun goes down, plain meals with little seasoning or multiple tastes and textures being overwhelming or allergic to them, avoids the symbols of the church as they don't see the point in some cases, abnormal dress sense, ages slower because not in the sun as much, pale skin, would rather live alone, isolate in a building that could house their collections of books or items. I have seen myself as wanting to be a vampire if that had been an option. They just keep to themselves. Vampires, like some autistic people, have to ask, be given permission to enter a home, or be invited to feel welcome, and if they vibe with you, care for you, they can collect special others as familiars, e.g. people or pets that they will defend as they feel responsible for keeping them safe and close. They avoid silver, as the flatware was probably a sensory nightmare or made food taste weird. They avoid mirrors, as neurodivergent people have higher chances of body dysphoria about themselves and how they want to look or think they look, and being chimeric doggies would need someone skilled to handle them, wild or domestic. We're all animals, my lady. In other words, monsters, vampire or otherwise, describe what in-group societies commonly demonize repressed through force, e.g. silver bullets or stakes through the heart. This includes anyone different, but especially neurodivergent and GNC people in Western Europe before systemic racism took off, more likely to be burned at the stake back then for resisting state decrees that targeted women, Jewish people, after Rome, formerly pagan, converted to Christianity with the Byzantines, and the mentally ill, e.g. Hammer of Witches, or On the Tricks of Demons. 1478 and 1563, see Dark Shadows, above. Artist Robert Ingpen cited Understanding Vampires. Animals are hunted by state powers, including werewolves or vampires or anything comparable. R.A. Nature vs. the State, 2025. The symptoms would include a variety of things that unto themselves have been dead metaphors for some time, e.g. hairy palms above. R.E. Robert Ingpen. Vampires don't just embody superstition, but esoteric superstition and dogma in duality that has been sacred and profane at different points throughout history, e.g. the Catholics versus the Protestants, or the Communists versus the Fascists, and similar sectarian conflicts during moral panics. R.E. Matheson's I Am Legend and Mad Science, a metaphor for American 1950s Red Scare, aka McCarthyism. Have you no decency, sir? That concludes part 1 of Interview with the Vampire. Thank you for staying around until the end. It means a lot if you did, and also I'm impressed. If you like what I do, you can like, share, and subscribe. But here's a little bit more information about me to close out the video. My name's Persephone Vanderwaard. I have my MA in Gothic English Literature and independent PhD in Gothic Poetics and Little Gothic BDSM, focusing partially on Metroidvania, and I am the author of the multi-volume non-profit book series Sex Positivity versus Sex Coercion or Gothic Communism. Its art director, sole invigilator, illustrator, and primary editor. the other co-writer, co-editor being May Ryan, a rape survivor, granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, and Dutch resistance member, and someone anti-war as a business, anti-Zionist, and anti-racist, anti-white supremacist, who specializes in tokenism, e.g. TERFs, swerfs, and fascist feminism. I'm a male-to-female trans woman, sulking and Amazon enthusiast, former YouTuber, anti-fascist, loud critic of Marxist-Leninism, state vampirism, atheist and Satanist, polypan kingster with multiple partners, erotic artist, pornographer, and anarcho-communist, i.e. under my brand of Gothic anarcho-communism, as a holistic intersectional discipline, one devised in 2022-2023, in which my friends and I currently achieve together. I take donations for my work, which goes towards helping sex workers, trans people, and other minorities. I currently take payment on PayPal, Patreon, and Cash App, etc. All links are available on my link tree. Every bit helps.